The blonde gunsmith's hands trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. Laughter crackled across Fort Benning's elite range as Emma Lawson knelt beside the jammed M4. "Need us to color code the instructions, sweetheart?" a voice mocked. She didn't flinch, not even when Captain William Harrison leaned in, voice dripping venom. "Maybe you're better off making coffee at the commissary." Then she pulled something from her vest, a worn patch, Delta Force insignia. Harrison froze. The laughter stopped because only one woman had ever served Black Ops with that patch, and she vanished 5 years ago. This story of courage, sacrifice, and honor will make you question what true patriotism really means. Share your experiences with respect in the comments below. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Benning's firing range, the Georgia heat already building despite the early hour. Military precision defined every aspect of the facility, except for Emma Lawson's workbench. Tools lay arranged in patterns that would confuse anyone but her, each positioned at exact distances that seemed random to the untrained eye, but formed a system she'd perfected over 5 years. Emma Lawson presented herself as invisible as possible. 34 years old, she dressed in oversized work clothes that hid her athletic build. Her blonde hair stayed pulled back in a utilitarian ponytail. No makeup adorned her face, which might have been beautiful if she'd ever smiled. She spoke only when necessary, usually in technical terms about barrel wear or trigger pull weights. The other contractors at Fort Benning had learned to work around her silence. They called her that weird contractor who never joins happy hour, not knowing that she spent those evening hours running the base perimeter. 3 miles every night, no matter the weather, 1 mile for each ghost that followed her. Her reputation rested solely on her work. When elite operators brought in weapons that others had declared beyond repair, Emma fixed them. She could diagnose a malfunction from the sound alone. Her knowledge of ballistics rivaled that of any military scientist, yet she never boasted, never explained how she knew what she knew. The calluses on her hands told a story she wouldn't voice. They were in the wrong places for someone who'd only ever been a gunsmith. Between her thumb and forefinger, the kind that comes from thousands of hours gripping a rifle stock. Along the edges of her palms, worn smooth from fast roping out of helicopters. On her knees, permanent reminders of countless hours in firing positions. These were the hands of someone who'd lived behind a weapon, not just maintained one. As the morning briefing ended, Emma collected her assignment sheet without meeting anyone's eyes. She'd been tasked with repairing a dozen M4s from the 75th Ranger Regiment. High priority. She moved to her station with purpose, each step calculated, always aware of exits, sight lines, potential cover. Old habits. "Lawson!" The voice cut through the ambient noise of the range. Captain William Harrison approached, his 65-year-old frame still imposing, despite the decades that had bent his posture slightly forward. Gulf War veteran, Bronze Star recipient, and current rangemaster, Harrison carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd faced death and won. His gray hair was cropped in the same military style he'd worn for 40 years. "Sir." Emma's response, a single word, neutral tone. "These Rangers need their weapons operational by 1400 hours. Not 1401, not 1359, 1400 exactly." Harrison loomed over her workbench, deliberately invading her space. "Think you can handle that, or should I get someone with actual combat experience to take over?" Emma's face remained impassive, but those who watched closely might have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes, the only indication that the barb had landed. "Yes, sir, 1400 hours." She turned to her work, dismissing him without actually doing so. It was a subtle form of defiance that Harrison couldn't call out without seeming petty. Harrison lingered, waiting for more, but Emma had already begun disassembling the first rifle, her movements fluid and precise. After an uncomfortable moment, he stalked away, muttering something about "women in my armory," just loud enough for others to hear. The workshop fell silent as everyone pretended to focus on their tasks. Emma felt their glances, but ignored them. She'd learned long ago that recognition was dangerous. Anonymity kept her ghosts at bay, most days. Across the range, Sergeant Jack Morgan watched the interaction with curiosity. At 38, Morgan had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq before transferring to Fort Benning as an instructor. He'd noticed Harrison's unusual fixation on the quiet blonde gunsmith since arriving 6 months ago. "What's the captain's problem with Lawson?" he asked the contractor beside him, a man named Rodriguez who'd been at the base for years. Rodriguez shrugged. "Been that way since she arrived. Some say he applied for a male armorer specifically and got her instead. Others think he just hates women in general. All I know is she fixes weapons better than anyone I've ever seen, and he rides her harder than a drill sergeant with a new recruit." Morgan nodded slowly, watching as Emma methodically worked through the first rifle. Her movements weren't just practiced, they were instinctive. The way she handled weapons reminded him of something he couldn't quite place, something he'd seen in operators with thousands of hours behind a trigger. "How long has she been here?" Morgan asked. "About 5 years. Showed up with paperwork from some private contractor. Keeps to herself. Never talks about her past." Rodriguez lowered his voice. "Between you and me, I think she's seen some shit. Got that 1,000-yard stare sometimes when she thinks no one's looking." Morgan's interest deepened. He'd seen that look before, in mirrors, in the eyes of men who'd walked through hell and somehow returned. It wasn't something you could fake. By midday, Emma had repaired 8 of the 12 rifles, each function checked to perfection. She moved to the 9th when she noticed a presence at her station. Harrison again, this time with a small audience of younger officers trailing behind him. "Gentlemen, this is what happens when the Pentagon prioritizes diversity quotas over competence," Harrison announced, gesturing toward Emma as if she were an exhibit. "Lawson here probably learned everything she knows from YouTube videos. Isn't that right?" Emma continued working, her focus unwavering. "See that, gentleman? Can't even defend herself because she knows I'm right." Harrison leaned closer. "The armory used to be sacred ground. Now they let anyone in." One of the young lieutenants shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with respect, those rifles look properly serviced." Harrison's head snapped toward the speaker. "When I want your opinion, Lieutenant Davis, I'll ask for it. Until then, observe and learn what happens when standards slip." Emma completed the 9th rifle, function checked it, and set it aside. Still, she said nothing. The silence stretched until Harrison, frustrated by her non-reaction, reached for the weapon she'd just repaired. "Let's see if this even works properly." He worked the charging handle and peered into the chamber with exaggerated scrutiny. Finding nothing to criticize, he set it down harder than necessary. "Lucky repair. Don't get cocky." As Harrison led his entourage away, Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear or anger, but from the effort of restraint. 5 years of practice, and still the combat instincts lurked just beneath the surface, ready to emerge at the slightest provocation. At night, when the range fell silent and the last workers departed, Emma remained. She'd volunteered for inventory duty, another opportunity to avoid social interaction. Alone among the weapons, she could almost breathe normally. Almost. The nightmares always came at 0300. Military precision, even in her subconscious. Tonight was no different. Sand and blood, the weight of Thomas's body across her shoulders, the radio crackling with static. "Ghost, report position." The taste of copper in her mouth, the knowledge that Michael and Benjamin weren't answering because they couldn't. The mountain pass where shadows moved like water. The decision, the promise, the failure. Emma woke in her Spartan apartment, breath coming in controlled gasps, body rigid. 5 years, and still the same dream. She checked the time, 0304. Close enough. Sleep wouldn't return now. It never did. She rose, dressed in running clothes, and slipped outside into the Georgia night. The air hung heavy with humidity as her feet found their rhythm on the perimeter road. 1 mile for Thomas, 1 mile for Michael, 1 mile for Benjamin. The ritual never changed, nor did the guilt that drove it. By dawn, she'd showered and returned to the range, appearing no different than any other day. If anyone noticed the shadows beneath her eyes, they knew better than to mention them. Emma's apartment stood on the outskirts of Columbus, Georgia, a 15-minute drive from Fort Benning. The one-bedroom unit occupied the second floor of a nondescript building that housed mainly military contractors and junior officers. She'd chosen it for its unremarkable nature, and the fact that her neighbors, mostly single men focused on their careers, asked few questions. Inside, the space reflected its occupant, functional, orderly, and deliberately impersonal. No photographs adorned the walls. No mementos cluttered the surfaces. A visitor would find nothing to indicate who lived there or what mattered to them. The living room contained a worn couch, a coffee table bearing technical manuals, and a small television Emma rarely watched. The kitchen held exactly one place setting, one plate, one bowl, one cup, one set of utensils. The refrigerator contained protein shakes, eggs, and prepackaged meals, fuel rather than food. The bedroom held a single bed made with military precision. The closet contained identical sets of work clothes and running attire, hanging with mathematical spacing between each hanger. No dress clothes, no casual wear for social occasions that never happened. The only hint of personality existed in a locked metal case beneath her bed. Emma opened it rarely, usually after the nightmares grew too intense to bear alone. Inside lay 3 spent shell casings, polished to a high shine from years of handling. Each bore a date etched with a knife point. Each represented a promise unfulfilled. Also in the case, a combat knife with a worn handle, a set of dog tags not her own, and a small vial of sand from a distant mountain pass. Beneath these items lay a photograph, its edges worn smooth from handling. 3 men and 1 woman in desert camouflage, arms around each other's shoulders, faces young and smiling beneath the Afghan sun. On the back, written in block letters, Ghost Team, Anderson, Rivera, Clark, Lawson, Kandahar 2018. The 5th item in the box was the most valuable, a Navy SEAL trident, modified with 4 stars along the anchor points and 3 names etched microscopically into the waves beneath the eagle. Only those who had lost teammates in combat received this honor. Emma's bore 3 names: Thomas Anderson, Michael Rivera, Benjamin Clark. They died because someone behind a desk made a bad call. Emma lived because they chose to cover her retreat. On this particular morning, after another night of fractured sleep and pre-dawn running, Emma found herself opening the box before leaving for work, something she normally avoided. The nightmares had been worse lately, more vivid. Perhaps it was the approaching anniversary of the operation, or perhaps it was Harrison's escalating hostility. Whatever the cause, she needed the grounding these objects provided. She lifted the trident, feeling its weight, physical and symbolic, in her palm. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember who she had been. Chief Petty Officer Emma Ghost Lawson, the first woman to complete Bud's training, the silent infiltrator who moved through enemy territory like a shadow, the team leader who never lost a man until that final mission. The memories surged forward, threatening to overwhelm the careful compartmentalization she'd maintained for 5 years. The crucible, 72 hours alone in hostile territory with minimal equipment, the final test before receiving her trident, the CIA operative who said it couldn't be done by a woman, the satisfaction when she returned with all objectives completed and 12 hours to spare. Somalia, 12 hostage takers in a pitch-black compound, eliminated with only a knife and sidearm. The hostages never saw her face, only felt the ropes fall away as their captors ceased breathing. Syria, 23 American contractors surrounded by enemy forces, written off as casualties by command. Her unauthorized infiltration, the exfiltration route secured through a series of impossible shots in sandstorm conditions. The helicopter pilot's face when she emerged from the storm with all 23 contractors. Emma closed her fist around the trident until its edges bit into her palm. The pain anchored her to the present, pulled her back from the brink of memories that served no purpose now. She was no longer that person. Ghost had died in those mountains along with her team. Only Emma Lawson remained, a gunsmith, nothing more. She replaced the items carefully, locked the case, and slid it back beneath the bed. Then she straightened, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face another day of calculated invisibility. At Fort Benning, Emma arrived precisely 30 minutes before her shift began, early enough to prepare her workspace but not so early as to appear eager. She nodded to the security guard at the checkpoint, received her daily assignments, and moved to her station without engaging anyone in conversation. As she set up her tools, she noticed Frank Carter watching her from his workbench across the room. At 60, Carter was the senior armorer on base, a Vietnam veteran who transitioned to weapons maintenance after 20 years of active service. His leathery face had witnessed decades of war, his hands bore the same distinctive calluses as Emma's, and his eyes held secrets he never shared. Unlike the others, Carter never mocked Emma or questioned her abilities. He simply watched, occasionally offering a small nod of approval when she solved a particularly difficult weapons malfunction. They rarely spoke, but a wordless understanding existed between them, the recognition of shared experiences that transcended the need for conversation. Today, however, Carter approached her workbench, movements deliberate, eyes scanning the room to ensure their privacy. "Harrison's on the warpath," he said quietly, voice pitched to reach only her ears. "Brass visiting from Pentagon. He's looking to make an example of someone." Emma nodded once, acknowledging the warning without looking up from her work. "Thanks." Carter hesitated, then added, "Some of us are meeting tonight. American Legion Hall, 2,000 hours. You should come." Before Emma could respond, he returned to his station, leaving her to process the unexpected invitation. The American Legion Hall meant veterans, likely special operations veterans based on Carter's background. The invitation wasn't casual. Carter had never extended one before. She considered declining. Social gatherings represented risk, questions about her past, potential recognition, the exhausting effort of maintaining her cover story. Yet something in Carter's tone suggested importance beyond mere socialization. The day progressed with the expected challenges. Harrison appeared at mid-morning with a delegation of Pentagon officials, using the opportunity to highlight what he considered deficiencies in the armory. "As you can see, gentlemen, we're making do with limited resources," Harrison announced as he led the group through the facility. "Some of our personnel," his gaze lingered meaningfully on Emma, "lack the combat experience that used to be prerequisite for this role." The visiting colonel, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, followed Harrison's gaze to Emma's workstation. "That contractor seems quite efficient, Captain Harrison. I've been watching her work for several minutes, and her technique appears excellent." Harrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Appearances can be deceiving, Colonel Hayes. Technical proficiency isn't the same as understanding how these weapons perform under combat conditions." Colonel Hayes raised an eyebrow but said nothing further as Harrison hurried the group toward the next area of the facility. Emma, who had heard every word despite appearing absorbed in her work, filed away the interaction. Hayes, the name tickled something in her memory, but she couldn't immediately place it. By afternoon, Emma had completed her assigned tasks and moved to help another armorer who had fallen behind. She worked steadily, aware of Harrison's periodic glances in her direction, but refusing to acknowledge them. The routine was familiar, his hostility, her silence, the curious stares of others caught in their unspoken conflict. As her shift ended, Emma cleaned her workspace meticulously, signed out her tools, and prepared to leave. At the door, she found Carter waiting, his weather-beaten face unreadable. "You coming tonight?" he asked simply. Emma hesitated, then nodded once. "I'll be there." The American Legion Hall stood on the outskirts of Columbus, its brick facade weathered by decades of Georgia storms. American flags flanked the entrance, fluttering in the evening breeze. Inside, the wood-paneled walls displayed memorabilia from conflicts spanning a century. World War II to Afghanistan, the nation's military history preserved in photographs, medals, and fading newspaper clippings. Emma arrived at precisely 2,000 hours, parking her nondescript sedan at the edge of the lot where it offered the quickest exit route, another habit from her previous life. She scanned the building's perimeter before approaching, noting exits, potential cover positions, and the vehicles present. Old tactics, unnecessary now, but impossible to abandon. Inside, she found a group of 12 men seated in a loose circle, each bearing the unmistakable bearing of special operations veterans. Carter sat among them, nodding slightly as Emma entered. The conversation ceased, 12 pairs of eyes assessing her with professional interest rather than the dismissive glances she'd grown accustomed to at the base. "Gentlemen," Carter said, breaking the silence, "this is Emma Lawson from the Armory. Emma, meet some old friends." The men nodded in greeting but offered no names, another special operations habit. Emma returned the nod, equally taciturn, and took the empty seat Carter indicated. "We've been watching you," said a gray-haired man with the build of a former swimmer. "Not many armorers diagnose weapons the way you do. Most check manuals. You check the weapon like someone who's fired thousands of rounds through it." Emma maintained her neutral expression. "I've had good training." A ripple of knowing chuckles circled the room. The gray-haired man continued, "I'm sure you have. The question is where. Most civilian armorers don't clear rooms before entering them, don't position themselves with sightlines to all exits, don't run the same 3-mile road every night regardless of weather. The room fell silent as Emma calculated her response. These men weren't making accusations. They were stating observations. Denying what they already knew would only damage her credibility. Old habits, she conceded finally. Carter leaned forward. Everyone in this room has old habits, Emma. That's why we meet. Sometimes those habits are all that keep us anchored when civilians can't understand what we've seen or done. Emma's gaze swept the circle. Now that she looked more carefully, she recognized the tribal markings most civilians would miss. The way they positioned themselves in the room, the calluses on their hands, the watchful eyes that never fully relaxed. These were her people, whether she wanted to admit it or not. "Why am I here?" she asked directly. The gray-haired man exchanged glances with Carter before responding. "Because Harrison's attention isn't random, and you deserve to know why." Captain William Harrison's office reflected its occupant, organized to military precision, decorated with artifacts from a distinguished career, yet harboring secrets in its locked drawers and password-protected files. Photographs on the wall traced his evolution from young lieutenant in Desert Storm to intelligence officer in Afghanistan, each image capturing a progressively harder expression in eyes that had seen too much. At 65, Harrison should have retired years ago. His contemporaries had transitioned to civilian consulting firms or government contractor positions that paid triple his military salary. Yet he remained at Fort Benning, overseeing the weapons range and armory with the intensity of a man half his age, as if seeking atonement through endless service. This morning, Harrison arrived before dawn, unlocking his office while the base still slumbered. He moved to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, and removed a bottle of bourbon and a single glass. Pouring 2 fingers, he raised the glass in a silent toast to the photograph on his desk. A young soldier in desert camouflage, smiling beneath the Afghan sun, eyes unclouded by the horrors they would later witness. "Another year, Thomas," Harrison murmured to the empty room. "Another year without answers." He drained the glass, replaced the bottle, and composed himself just as his aide knocked on the door. The day's schedule awaited: weapons certifications for a ranger unit, equipment inspections, personnel evaluations, and the ongoing problem of Emma Lawson. Lawson, the name burned in his mind like acid. 5 years she'd been at his facility, 5 years of silent competence that somehow felt like an accusation. Harrison had requested her transfer dozens of times, each appeal denied by Pentagon bureaucrats who cited her exemplary performance records. They didn't understand what he saw when he looked at her, not just a female contractor in a traditionally male role, but a walking reminder of questions that remained unanswered. "Sir, Sergeant Morgan is here with the range reports," his aide announced from the doorway. Harrison straightened, professionalism masking his troubled thoughts. "Send him in." Jack Morgan entered with the confident stride of a career soldier, manila folder tucked under one arm. At 38, Morgan represented the new generation of military leadership, combat tested in Iraq and Afghanistan, educated at West Point, committed to modernizing traditions without abandoning their core values. "Morning, Captain," Morgan said, placing the folder on Harrison's desk. "Range reports as requested, plus the quarterly ammunition expenditure analysis." Harrison nodded curtly. "Anything I should know before the briefing?" "Just one item, sir. We're seeing unusual wear patterns on the M4s from Alpha Company. Lawson spotted it yesterday. Looks like the gas tubes are wearing prematurely. Could be a manufacturing defect in that batch." Harrison's jaw tightened at the mention of Lawson's name. "And she diagnosed this how?" "Sound analysis, sir. She could tell from the firing pattern that something was off. Saved us from potential failures in the field." Morgan delivered this assessment neutrally, though he'd been impressed by Lawson's expertise. "Sound analysis," Harrison repeated flatly, "from a contractor with no combat experience." Morgan hesitated, sensing dangerous waters. "With respect, sir, her technical skills are exceptional." "Technical skills don't mean shit when bullets are flying, Sergeant. Remember that." Harrison dismissed him with a wave. "That's all." As Morgan departed, Harrison's gaze returned to the photograph on his desk. Thomas Harrison Anderson. Anderson. His sister's son, his only nephew, killed in Afghanistan 5 years ago, under circumstances the Pentagon still labeled classified. The official story cited a routine patrol ambushed in mountain terrain, 3 operators killed, 1 survivor who managed to recover sensitive intelligence materials. What the official story omitted was the survivor's identity, the exact nature of the mission, and why a team of elite operators had been sent into a known hot zone with faulty intelligence. Harrison had spent 5 years trying to pierce the veil of classifications surrounding his nephew's death, using every contact from his intelligence career, calling in favors from retired generals and active CIA operatives. The wall of silence remained impenetrable. Until Emma Lawson arrived at Fort Benning, Harrison couldn't explain his certainty that Lawson somehow connected to Thomas's death. Nothing in her background check suggested special operations experience. Her employment history listed private security firms and weapons manufacturers. Yet something in her bearing, her expertise, the haunted look that occasionally broke through her careful mask, all triggered Harrison's finely honed intelligence officer instincts. He'd made it his mission to break her, to push until she revealed whatever secrets she carried. 5 years of systematic pressure had yielded nothing but his growing reputation as a misogynist and bully, a price he willingly paid if it might eventually provide answers about Thomas. The morning briefing proceeded without incident. Harrison assigned daily tasks, reviewed security protocols, and dispatched his team to their stations. As the room cleared, he found himself alone with Frank Carter, the senior armorer whose Vietnam-era expertise had proven invaluable to the facility. "Need something, Carter?" Harrison asked, noting the older man's deliberate lingering. Carter considered him with eyes that had witnessed more war than most men could imagine. "Just wondering why you're riding Lawson so hard. She's the best weapons tech we've got." Harrison's expression hardened. "I don't recall asking for your opinion on personnel matters." "No, sir, you didn't," Carter acknowledged, unintimidated. "But I've been fixing weapons since Vietnam, and I know talent when I see it. That girl has skills you don't learn in civilian courses." "That girl doesn't belong in my armory," Harrison replied, emphasizing the word with contempt. "And if you've got concerns about my management style, take them up the chain of command." Carter held his gaze for a long moment before nodding slightly. "As you say, Captain. Just thought you'd want to know. Colonel Hayes was impressed by her yesterday. Might be worth considering a different approach." After Carter departed, Harrison sat alone in the briefing room, turning this information over in his mind. Catherine Hayes, a soldier Ty Hayes, newly promoted to full colonel, commanded respect throughout the special operations community. Her interest in a contractor like Lawson seemed peculiar, unless Hayes knew something Harrison didn't. His instincts prickled with renewed certainty. Whatever Emma Lawson was hiding, whatever connection she might have to Thomas's death, he would uncover it, even if it meant risking his career in the process. The opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. That afternoon, as Harrison conducted a tour for junior officers, he spotted Lawson working alone at her station, repairing a jammed M4. A plan formed instantly. "Gentlemen," he announced to the officers, "let's observe how our civilian contractors handle basic weapon malfunctions. This should be educational." He led the group to Lawson's workbench, positioning them to create an audience. Lawson continued working, apparently oblivious to their presence, though Harrison noted the subtle tension that entered her shoulders. "Ms. Lawson," he began, voice carrying across the armory, "perhaps you could explain to these officers how you're addressing this malfunction." Without looking up, Lawson responded in precise technical language, describing the failure point, the repair procedure, and the preventative measures that would keep the weapon operational in field conditions. Her explanation was flawless, delivered with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with both the weapon's design and its performance under combat stress. Harrison, undeterred, pressed further. "Impressive terminology. Tell me, where exactly did you learn about field conditions? Perhaps from a manual?" A ripple of uncomfortable chuckles spread through the junior officers. Lawson finally looked up, her blue eyes meeting Harrison's with an expression that betrayed nothing. "Experience, sir," she answered simply. "Experience," Harrison repeated, infusing the word with skepticism. "Interesting. These officers have actual combat experience, Ms. Lawson. They've fired these weapons when it mattered, not just on controlled ranges. Perhaps you'd care to elaborate on your experience. The armory had grown silent, other workers pausing to observe the confrontation. Lawson's gaze remained steady, but Harrison caught the slight whitening of her knuckles as she gripped the disassembled rifle. My experience is reflected in my work, Captain, she replied evenly. The weapons I service don't fail in the field. One of the junior officers, a lieutenant with a recent combat tour, nodded appreciatively. That's ultimately what matters, sir. Reliability under fire. Harrison shot the lieutenant a quelling look before returning his attention to Lawson. What matters, Lieutenant, is understanding the difference between theory and practice, between reading about combat and experiencing it firsthand. He leaned closer to Lawson, voice lowering though still audible to those nearby. Some people talk about war, others fight it, and some run when their teammates need them most. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Something dangerous flickered in Lawson's eyes, a momentary crack in her careful facade. Her breathing pattern altered slightly, becoming the controlled rhythm of a predator preparing to strike. Her weight shifted almost imperceptibly, center of gravity lowering in a stance Harrison recognized from close-quarters combat training. For 3 heartbeats, Harrison stood inches from a coiled weapon, his intelligence officer's instincts screaming danger while a part of him exulted in finally provoking a reaction. Then, with visible effort, Lawson controlled whatever had surged to the surface. The moment passed, leaving Harrison with the certainty that he'd glimpsed something significant beneath her civilian disguise. "If you'll excuse me, Captain," Lawson said, voice perfectly steady despite the tension vibrating through her frame, "I need to complete these repairs before the next firing rotation." Harrison stepped back, satisfied with this small victory. "By all means, wouldn't want to keep you from your important work." As he led the officers away, Harrison caught Frank Carter watching the exchange, disapproval evident in his weathered features. Harrison met his gaze without apology. Carter, of all people, should understand the importance of uncovering the truth no matter the methods required. Later, alone in his office, Harrison reviewed Lawson's personnel file for the 100th time. The details remained frustratingly mundane: civilian education, private sector employment, no military record. Yet his interaction with her that afternoon had confirmed what he'd suspected for years. Emma Lawson was no ordinary armorer. The way she'd shifted stance, the controlled breathing, the predatory focus that had momentarily replaced her usual blank expression, these were the reactions of someone with advanced combat training. Harrison opened his laptop and composed an email to an old contact at the Pentagon, requesting deeper background checks on Lawson. As he typed, his gaze drifted to Thomas's photograph. "I'm getting closer," he promised a smiling face that would never age. "Whatever she's hiding, I'll find it." The morning dawned clear and hot, Georgia summer asserting itself with oppressive humidity that clung to skin like a living thing. Emma completed her ritual 3-mile run before sunrise, showered in her Spartan apartment, and arrived at Fort Benning precisely 30 minutes before her shift. The routine never varied, a structure that anchored her days and kept the ghosts at arm's length. Today, however, brought an unwelcome change. As Emma signed in at the security checkpoint, the guard handed her a modified assignment sheet. "Captain Harrison wants you at Range Charlie at 0900, the guard said, watching her reaction carefully. "Said to bring your tools." Emma accepted the paper with a neutral expression that revealed nothing of her inner wariness. Range Charlie typically hosted specialized weapons testing, not routine maintenance. Harrison was deviating from protocol, which meant he was planning something. At her workbench, Emma found Frank Carter already preparing for the day, his movements efficient despite arthritic hands that had serviced weapons for nearly 5 decades. "Morning," Carter greeted her, voice pitched low. "Heard about Range Charlie?" Emma nodded once, organizing her toolkit with methodical precision. "Harrison's got an SR-25 sniper rifle he's been saving for a special occasion," Carter continued, pretending to focus on his own work. "Been in storage for months. Word is he's rigged it with multiple malfunctions." The information confirmed Emma's suspicions. This wasn't about weapon maintenance. It was another test, another attempt to break through her carefully constructed persona. "Thanks," she said simply, appreciating the warning without elaborating further. Carter hesitated, then added, "The boys from last night will be watching. You're not alone in this." The statement surprised her. Not just the continued reference to the veterans she'd met at the American Legion Hall, but the implication that they considered her one of their own. Emma had spent 5 years avoiding exactly this kind of connection, yet she couldn't deny the comfort it offered. At precisely 0900 hours, Emma arrived at Range Charlie, toolkit in hand. The scene that greeted her resembled a theatrical production more than a maintenance request. Harrison stood center stage, surrounded by a semicircle of junior officers, NCOs, and range personnel. On a table before him lay an SR-25 sniper rifle, the same weapon system Emma had carried during countless operations in her previous life. "Ah, Miss Lawson," Harrison announced with false cordiality. "So glad you could join us. Gentlemen, I've arranged a skills assessment today." Emma remained silent, assessing the situation with the tactical awareness that had kept her alive through dozens of high-risk operations. Harrison was playing to an audience, creating witnesses to whatever he had planned. The rifle itself appeared deliberately neglected, its once pristine surfaces dulled by improper storage and handling. "As you know," Harrison continued, addressing the assembled group, "maintaining peak weapon performance is critical to mission success. Today we'll observe how our civilian contractors diagnose complex weapon failures." He gestured Emma forward with exaggerated courtesy. "Ms. Lawson here believes she's a weapons expert. Let's see if she can identify what's wrong with this rifle." Emma approached the table, aware of every eye following her movements. The situation carried echoes of a different time, standing before instructors at Bud's training, being evaluated by skeptical superiors who believed women couldn't meet the standards of special operations. She'd proven them wrong then through silent competence. She would do the same now. Harrison placed the SR-25 on the table with unnecessary force. "Take your time, sweetheart," he said, voice dripping condescension. "We know thinking isn't your strong suit." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the audience, though Emma noted several faces that remained carefully neutral, including Sergeant Morgan, whose expression suggested growing discomfort with Harrison's tactics. Emma focused on the weapon before her, allowing her training to take over. The SR-25 had been a familiar extension of her body during her operational years. She disassembled and reassembled it blindfolded, adjusted its components in sandstorms and mountain blizzards, trusted her life to its precision. Without fully field stripping the rifle, Emma began her assessment, hands moving with the confidence of profound familiarity. She worked silently, methodically, identifying each sabotage component through touch, sight, and the distinctive feel of metal under stress. After 3 minutes of examination, she looked up, face composed. Gas tube bent at approximately 3 degrees. Port fouling consistent with 700 rounds of steel case ammunition. Buffer spring compressed beyond specifications. Scope mount shows stress fractures. Trigger group contaminated with sand. She paused, then added, "There's also scoring in the chamber. This weapon hasn't just been neglected, it's been deliberately damaged." The range fell silent, Harrison's face flushed with color as Emma identified issues even he hadn't noticed when preparing the test. The SR-25 had indeed been sabotaged with multiple failures, each requiring different diagnostic skills to identify. "Lucky guesses," Harrison managed, though his voice lacked conviction. Frustrated by Emma's technical precision, he shifted to personal attacks. "You're one of those women who hangs around military bases trying to feel important, playing soldier because you couldn't make it in the real world." Emma's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Her left hand closed around a torque wrench with enough force to whiten her knuckles. For a moment, something dangerous flashed in her eyes, a glimpse of the operator she'd once been, calculating angles, distances, the force required to incapacitate rather than kill. The temperature on the range seemed to drop despite the Georgia heat. Emma's breathing changed, becoming the controlled pattern that preceded combat action. She shifted her weight almost imperceptibly, but Harrison, trained to recognize threat indicators, suddenly found himself backing away without conscious decision. The junior officer sensed the shift, primitive instincts raising hackles as the harmless armorer transformed momentarily into something lethal. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the danger receded. Emma released the tool with visible effort, her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline of a defensive response aborted mid-execution. She returned to documenting the rifle's issues as if nothing had occurred, but everyone present had felt it. Death had entered the room and chosen mercy. The demonstration concluded in uncomfortable silence, Harrison's planned humiliation having backfired spectacularly. As the audience dispersed, Emma packed her tools with methodical precision, her movements once again those of a civilian contractor rather than a combat operator. Across the range, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Wilson observed the interaction with growing interest. At 55, Wilson had spent 20 years in naval special warfare before transitioning to Army Special Operations Liaison, a position that kept him connected to both branches' elite units. Something about the female contractor's diagnostic technique had triggered his professional curiosity. These weren't skills taught in civilian programs. They were learned through thousands of hours of hands-on experience in the world's most demanding environments. Wilson moved closer, cataloging details that began to form a pattern in his mind. Emma Lawson maintained perfect balance even when kneeling to examine equipment. Her eyes constantly checked exits and approaches, a habit ingrained in those who'd operated in hostile territory. When a Black Hawk helicopter passed overhead, she flinched with the specific tension pattern of someone who'd taken fire from aerial platforms. The final piece clicked into place when Emma used hand signals to communicate with another armorer across the noisy range, not standard military gestures, but the modified signals used exclusively by naval special warfare operators in field conditions. Wilson pulled out his secure phone and accessed classified databases, entering search parameters based on his observations. The initial results proved frustratingly redacted, but one call sign appeared repeatedly in the fragmentary reports. Ghost, a female SEAL who had operated for 7 years before vanishing from service records following a classified operation in Afghanistan. As Emma reached overhead to adjust equipment on a high shelf, her sleeve rode up, revealing a glimpse of black ink on her forearm. Wilson caught only a partial image, but recognized the distinctive wave pattern incorporated into a modified SEAL trident, a tattoo variant authorized only for operators who had served in Operation Desert Phantom. According to Wilson's mental roster, only 12 operators had received that variant. 11 were accounted for in current assignments or confirmed casualties. The 12th might well be repairing weapons at Fort Benning under the name Emma Lawson. Wilson's hands trembled slightly as the implications crystallized. If his suspicions proved correct, Captain Harrison had been systematically humiliating the legendary Ghost of Coronado, the first woman to complete the Crucible, the operator who'd extracted 23 contractors from Syria when the Pentagon declared them irrecoverable losses. Wilson watched as Harrison departed the range, oblivious to the fact that his vendetta against a female contractor might actually target one of the most decorated special operators of the modern era. The question remained, why would such an operator abandon her identity to work as an anonymous armorer? What had happened in those classified mountains of Afghanistan 5 years ago? And what connected Harrison to that mission with such emotional intensity? Wilson resolved to investigate further, his sense of duty to fellow operators overriding normal bureaucratic caution. If Emma Lawson was indeed the Ghost, she deserved the respect accorded to her sacrifice and service, not the systematic humiliation Harrison seemed determined to inflict. As the range cleared, Wilson noticed something else. Frank Carter, the senior armorer, positioning himself to maintain sightlines to Emma throughout the confrontation, his hand resting near his hip in the distinctive posture of someone prepared to intervene. The gesture triggered another realization in Wilson's mind. Carter wasn't just an old Vietnam veteran. He moved with the purpose of an operator maintaining overwatch. How many ghosts walked among them, Wilson wondered, silently protecting their own? Lieutenant Colonel Robert Wilson maintained a disciplined exterior that revealed nothing of the revelation unfolding in his mind. At 55, with salt and pepper hair cropped in military regulation, he presented the image of a career officer whose greatest battles occurred in Pentagon meeting rooms rather than distant battlefields. Few at Fort Benning knew the full extent of his operational history, 20 years in Navy special warfare, including multiple combat deployments and leadership roles in classified operations that would never appear in official histories. Wilson returned to his office, closed the door, and activated the secure terminal that connected to classified military databases. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard as he considered the implications of his suspicions. If Emma Lawson was indeed the operator codenamed Ghost, his inquiry would trigger security protocols and potentially expose her carefully constructed identity. Yet his obligation to a fellow operator, especially one who might be suffering in silence, outweighed procedural concerns. He entered his highest security clearance and accessed the Naval Special Warfare Personnel database, searching for records related to Operation Desert Phantom. The screen flashed a security warning. The operation remained classified at a level requiring additional verification. Wilson provided his biometric confirmation, waiting as the system processed his identity. The file that finally appeared contained more redactions than actual text, but confirmed his suspicions. A female operator, call sign Ghost, had participated in Desert Phantom and numerous subsequent high-risk missions. The unredacted portions described extraordinary achievements. First woman to complete BUD-ES training, record holder for confirmed eliminations during a single operation, author of the Urban Infiltration Manual, still used throughout special operations communities. Wilson scrolled through mission summaries, each more impressive than the last. Somalia, 12 hostage takers eliminated in complete darkness. Syria, 23 American contractors extracted from behind enemy lines. Afghanistan, multiple classified operations including the final mission, Operation Iron Shield. Here the redactions increased dramatically. The mission parameters, objectives, and outcomes remained hidden behind black lines. Only the basic facts emerged. A 4-person team inserted into mountain terrain, 3 operators killed in action, 1 survivor who managed to recover critical intelligence materials before extraction. The survivor's name was redacted, but Wilson needed no confirmation. He knew he'd found the Ghost. A photograph appeared on screen, heavily redacted but showing a female operator in desert camouflage. The face was obscured, but the stance matched Emma Lawson's distinctive posture. Below the image, a list of commendations scrolled past. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, 2, and numerous classified citations. The final notation in the file stated simply, Operator resigned commission following Operation Iron Shield. Current status, inactive reserve. Wilson leaned back, processing the information. The Ghost of Coronado, legendary among special operators for her tactical innovations and combat effectiveness, now repaired weapons at Fort Benning under an assumed identity. The transition from elite operator to anonymous armorer represented a dramatic fall from grace, likely triggered by whatever had occurred during Operation Iron Shield. But what connected Captain Harrison to this classified operation with such personal intensity? Wilson had observed Harrison's fixation on Emma Lawson for months, assuming it stemmed from outdated attitudes toward women in military roles. The reality appeared far more complex. Wilson closed the classified files and moved to a different database, the Army Personnel System. He searched for Harrison's service record, focusing on family connections that might explain the captain's vendetta against a former SEAL operator. The answer emerged within minutes. Captain William Harrison's emergency contact, Susan Harrison Anderson. Relationship, sister. Susan's son, Thomas Harrison Anderson. Status, killed in action, Afghanistan, 2018. Wilson's breath caught as the connection crystallized. Thomas Anderson, almost certainly one of the 3 operators killed during Operation Iron Shield. Harrison wasn't pursuing a random vendetta against a female contractor. He was fixated on the sole survivor of the mission that had killed his nephew. The revelation left Wilson with an ethical dilemma. As liaison officer, he maintained connections to both Army and Navy special operations communities. His loyalties extended to operators from all branches, including both Harrison and the woman who called herself Emma Lawson. Both deserved truth, but exposing Lawson's identity could reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. Wilson's contemplation was interrupted by a knock at his office door. "Enter," he called, closing the classified screens. Colonel Catherine Hayes stepped into the office, her presence unexpected and significant. At 62, Hayes commanded respect throughout special operations communities, her career spanning from early integration of women in military intelligence to leadership positions previously closed to female officers. Her current position, overseeing special operations training protocols, carried Pentagon authority that exceeded Wilson's pay grade. Colonel Hayes, Wilson acknowledged, rising to attention. "This is unexpected." Hayes gestured for him to be seated. At ease, Robert. This isn't an official visit. She closed the door and took the chair opposite his desk. Tell me what you know about Emma Lawson. Wilson maintained his professional composure despite his surprise. May I ask why you're interested, ma'am? Hayes studied him with the penetrating gaze that had intimidated generals. Because I recognized her yesterday during the inspection tour. 5 years older, different hair, civilian clothes, but unmistakable to someone who helped develop the female operator program. Wilson weighed his options carefully before responding. I believe she may be connected to naval special warfare, ma'am. Cut the diplomatic bullshit, Robert, Hayes said with the bluntness that characterized her leadership style. That's the ghost of Coronado repairing rifles out there. What I want to know is why Captain Harrison is conducting some personal vendetta against one of our most decorated operators. Wilson's respect for Hayes increased. She hadn't merely recognized Lawson, she'd identified the specific operator behind the civilian disguise. Harrison's nephew was Thomas Anderson, Wilson explained, killed in Operation Iron Shield 5 years ago. I believe he holds Lawson responsible in some capacity. Hayes absorbed this information with a slight nod. Anderson was part of Ghost Team, along with Rivera and Clark. She spoke the names with the reverence accorded to fallen operators. The official story cited intelligence failure leading to ambush. The unofficial version suggested betrayal by a CIA asset. And Harrison's connection to intelligence operations would make that particularly personal, Wilson concluded. He might believe Lawson could have prevented his nephew's death. Survivor's guilt is a powerful motivator, Hayes observed. For both of them. She paused, considering their options. We have 2 damaged veterans circling each other like wounded predators. Harrison seeking answers Lawson can't or won't provide. Lawson punishing herself by enduring his harassment. Wilson nodded his agreement. The situation becomes more volatile daily. This morning's confrontation nearly escalated to physical violence. I saw it, Hayes confirmed. For 3 seconds, Ghost emerged from beneath Emma Lawson's careful disguise. If she'd chosen differently, Harrison would be in the hospital. Or worse. The assessment matched Wilson's own. He'd witnessed the moment when Emma's combat instincts had surged to the surface, recognizing the controlled breathing and stance adjustments that preceded lethal action. What do you suggest, ma'am? Wilson asked, deferring to Hayes' authority and experience. Hayes considered the question carefully before responding. For now, we observe. I didn't come to Fort Benning by accident, Robert. The Pentagon is reviving the female operator program with expanded parameters. We need instructors with actual field experience. Understanding dawned in Wilson's mind. You want to recruit Lawson. If she's ready, Hayes qualified. 5 years of self-imposed exile suggest profound trauma. Forcing her back into the community could do more harm than good. Wilson thought of the haunted look he occasionally glimpsed beneath Emma's carefully maintained facade. And Harrison? Might be part of her healing process, though neither of them realizes it yet. Hayes rose, signaling the end of their conversation. Keep me informed of any developments, particularly any additional confrontations between them. After Hayes departed, Wilson remained at his desk, processing the complexity of the situation. Emma Lawson, the ghost of Coronado, working in self-imposed anonymity. William Harrison, grieving uncle seeking answers about his nephew's death. Both trapped in patterns of blame and guilt that prevented healing. Wilson resolved to watch them both more carefully, ready to intervene if necessary to protect them from themselves and each other. Across the base, Frank Carter observed Emma's return from the morning's confrontation. Her expression revealed nothing, but the subtle tension in her movements told Carter everything he needed to know. Harrison had pushed harder than usual, nearly triggering the combat responses Emma had spent 5 years suppressing. Carter approached her workbench, positioning himself to block potential observers. You okay? He asked quietly. Emma nodded once, hands steady as she organized her tools. Fine. Harrison's playing with fire, Carter observed. He has no idea what you're capable of. A flicker of surprise crossed Emma's features before her customary control reasserted itself. I don't know what you're talking about. Carter smiled slightly, the expression crinkling the weathered skin around his eyes. I didn't recognize you at first. The blonde hair threw me off. Last time I saw you, you were a brunette leading Bud's candidates through close-quarters battle drills at Coronado. Emma went perfectly still, the only indication that Carter's words had registered. When she spoke, her voice carried dangerous undertones. "You're mistaken." "No, I'm not, Chief," Carter replied, using her former rank deliberately. "I was consulting on the female operator integration program." "You wouldn't remember me, just another old SEAL instructor among many. But I remember you. The instructors called you Ghost because you moved through kill houses like a shadow." Emma's eyes met his directly for the first time, assessing the threat he potentially represented. Carter held her gaze steadily, allowing her to read the truth in his expression. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. "Because Harrison's vendetta isn't random," Carter explained. "Thomas Anderson was his nephew. Harrison's been searching for answers about Iron Shield for 5 years, and he believes you have them." Emma's composure faltered momentarily, pain flashing across her features before disappearing behind her practiced mask. "Anderson, Rivera, Clark," she said softly, reciting the names like a litany. "They died because someone made a bad call. That's all Harrison needs to know." Carter nodded his understanding. "The men from last night, they're like us. Veterans who recognize something in you that civilians miss. They want to help." "I don't need help," Emma stated flatly. "Maybe not," Carter conceded, "but Harrison does, and so do the operators who still carry your tactical innovations into combat. Running from who you were doesn't serve anyone, especially not the memories of the men you lost." Emma's expression hardened. "I'm not running, I'm honoring a promise." Before Carter could respond, she turned away, effectively ending the conversation. He watched her resume work, her movements precise and controlled, despite the emotional turmoil he'd witnessed moments before. Whatever promise bound Emma Lawson to this self-imposed penance, it held power beyond anything Carter could address in a brief conversation. Later that evening, Emma completed her shift and departed the base, aware of being observed but uncertain by whom. Her counter-surveillance training activated automatically, varying her route, checking for tails, maintaining awareness of potential observation points. The habits of her former life reasserted themselves whenever she felt exposed. At her apartment, she conducted a careful perimeter check before entering. Nothing appeared disturbed, yet Emma sensed a shift in her carefully constructed world. Carter had recognized her. Wilson had watched her with too much interest during the morning's confrontation. Hayes had studied her with knowing eyes during yesterday's inspection. The walls of anonymity were crumbling, threatening the peace she'd forged through isolation and routine. Soon she would need to make decisions, confront the past she'd buried or disappear again, abandoning even this limited connection to the world she'd once served. Emma moved to the locked case beneath her bed, retrieving the sealed trident with its 3 etched names: Thomas Anderson, Michael Rivera, Benjamin Clark, her teammates, her brothers, her responsibility. Their deaths weighed heavier with each passing year, the burden undiminished by time or distance. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room, fingers tracing the names on her tattoo. "I couldn't bring you home." The admission, spoken aloud for the first time in years, opened floodgates Emma had carefully maintained since Afghanistan. Memories surged forward: the mountain ambush, the desperate firefight, Thomas bleeding out while she applied futile pressure to his wounds, Michael and Benjamin providing covering fire until their weapons fell silent, the impossible choice to abandon their bodies to recover the intelligence package. Emma sank to the floor, the trident clutched in her fist as grief finally broke through her carefully constructed defenses. For the first time since Afghanistan, she allowed herself to remember not just how her teammates had died, but how they had lived. Thomas's quiet humor, Michael's unwavering loyalty, Benjamin's philosophical nature. The men behind the names she'd reduced to memorial tattoos and daily running rituals. When the emotional storm passed, Emma rose with new clarity. Harrison deserved answers, not for his own peace, but for Thomas's memory. The truth might not bring healing to either of them, but continuing their current destructive pattern dishonored the sacrifices made on that mountain. Tomorrow she would confront the past she'd been running from for 5 years. Tonight she would prepare for whatever consequences that decision might bring. Across town, in his modest home filled with military memorabilia and family photographs, William Harrison sat alone with a glass of bourbon and the personnel file he'd received from Pentagon contacts. The file contained little he didn't already know about Emma Lawson: civilian education, contractor experience, excellent performance evaluations. Yet Harrison's instincts insisted there was more. Something connecting the quiet armorer to the classified operation that had claimed his nephew's life. Tomorrow he would escalate his campaign to break through her carefully maintained facade. One way or another, he would uncover the truth about Thomas's final mission and the survivor who had returned when his nephew hadn't. Harrison raised his glass to the photograph of Thomas in desert camouflage. "I'm getting closer," he promised. "Whatever she's hiding, I'll find it." In the shadows outside Harrison's home, Robert Wilson observed the captain's solitary vigil, weighing intervention against the natural progression of events. Sometimes healing required confrontation. The lancing of old wounds before reconstruction could begin. Wilson decided to let events unfold, maintaining watchful presence should either Emma or Harrison require support when their inevitable collision occurred. The stage was set for revelation, for truth long buried beneath layers of classification and personal grief. Tomorrow would bring either destruction or the first tentative steps toward healing. Wilson could only hope that these two wounded warriors would recognize in each other the same pain they carried individually, the burden of survival when others had fallen. As midnight approached, three veterans of different eras prepared for the battle to come, not with weapons, but with the courage to face truths they had avoided for 5 long years. Morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Emma completed her ritual 3-mile run as the first hints of dawn streaked the Georgia sky, each footfall a metronome counting down to confrontation. Today would bring change, whether destruction or revelation remained to be seen. In her apartment, she prepared with the methodical precision that had defined her operational career. Shower, uniform, equipment check. But today she added one additional item to her pocket, the worn Delta Force patch that had once identified her team in the mountains of Afghanistan, a tangible connection to the men whose memories she carried. Across town, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Wilson arrived at his office before sunrise, using the quiet hours to access classified records that might illuminate the connection between Emma Lawson and William Harrison. His security clearance, among the highest at Fort Benning, provided access to files few others could view. The records of Operation Iron Shield remained heavily redacted, but Wilson's experience in navigating bureaucratic obfuscation allowed him to piece together fragments into a coherent narrative. 4 operators inserted into mountain terrain near the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Mission objective: extract CIA asset with intelligence on terrorist network. Outcome: ambush, 3 KIA, 1 survivor who managed to retrieve classified materials despite severe injuries. The dates aligned perfectly with Thomas Anderson's death certificate. The location matched Harrison's deployment records as intelligence officer. The survivor, though unnamed in accessible files, could only be the woman now calling herself Emma Lawson. Wilson found additional fragments in after-action reports, mentions of intelligence failure and compromised asset that suggested betrayal rather than tactical error. If the CIA informant had deliberately led the team into ambush, the implications extended beyond personal tragedy to potential criminal negligence within the intelligence community. Such a scenario would explain both Emma's retreat from military service and Harrison's obsessive pursuit of answers. The captain's intelligence background would have given him enough access to suspect his nephew died because of bureaucratic failure rather than combat necessity. Wilson's research was interrupted by a secure message from Colonel Hayes. Situation developing. Harrison obtained partial access to Iron Shield files. Monitor and contain if necessary. The warning accelerated Wilson's timeline. If Harrison had obtained even redacted files from Operation Iron Shield, his confrontation with Emma might occur sooner than anticipated, potentially in public and without the contextual understanding necessary for resolution rather than further damage. Wilson gathered his materials and headed toward the armory, determined to prevent a collision that could destroy both wounded veterans. He arrived too late. In the armory's central workspace, Harrison stood before Emma's workbench, a classified folder in his trembling hand, face flushed with emotion barely contained. Around them, other armorers and range personnel had fallen silent, sensing the dangerous undercurrents between captain and contractor. 5 years, Harrison said, voice low but carrying in the silent room. 5 years I've searched for answers about my nephew's death. 5 years wondering why 3 operators died while 1 survived. Emma remained seated, her expression composed despite the tension evident in her posture. She said nothing, offering neither denial nor confirmation. Thomas Harrison Anderson, Harrison continued, emphasizing each syllable of his nephew's name. 26 years old, SEAL operator assigned to Ghost Team. Killed in action during Operation Iron Shield. He placed a photograph on her workbench, a young man in desert camouflage smiling beneath the Afghan sun. Recognition flickered across Emma's features before her control reasserted itself. Still, she remained silent. Harrison's voice hardened. I knew something was familiar about you from the moment you arrived. Couldn't place it until I saw the classified photographs this morning. Different hair color, civilian clothes, but the same person. He leaned closer. Chief Petty Officer Emma Ghost Lawson, the only survivor of Iron Shield. The armory had gone completely still, workers frozen in place as the confrontation unfolded. Frank Carter moved closer, positioning himself to intervene if necessary, while Wilson approached from the entrance, assessing options to de-escalate the situation. Emma finally spoke, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. This isn't the place for this conversation, Captain Harrison. The Shaw 5 years wasn't enough time to prepare your explanation? Harrison demanded, grief and anger warring in his expression. My nephew trusted you as his team leader. He died following your orders. Emma's composure cracked slightly, pain flashing across her features before disappearing behind her professional mask. Thomas died because someone at Intelligence Division sent us into an ambush with faulty information. You want answers? Start with whoever authorized that mission. The accusation struck Harrison like a physical blow. As former intelligence officer, he represented the very system Emma blamed for her team's deaths. His expression shifted from accusation to confusion, then to dawning horror as implications crystallized. You think he began, but Emma cut him off with a raised hand. My office, she said simply, rising from her workbench with the fluid grace of a predator. Not here. Harrison followed her through the armory to the small maintenance room she used for detailed repairs. Wilson and Carter exchanged glances, both recognizing the potential volatility of the situation, but understanding the necessity of privacy for what would follow. Inside the cramped office, Emma closed the door and faced Harrison directly for the first time. Without the performance she maintained for others, her bearing transformed, shoulders squared, chin raised, eyes focused with the intensity of a veteran operator. No longer Emma Lawson, civilian contractor, but Chief Lawson, SEAL team leader. You've spent 5 years trying to break me, she stated without preamble. Congratulations, Captain. Mission accomplished. Harrison placed the classified folder on her desk, his earlier aggression fading into something more complex. I just wanted to understand what happened to Thomas. The official reports were redacted beyond usefulness. No one at the Pentagon would answer my questions. What do you think happened? Emma asked, her tone neutral but watchful. Tell me your version. Harrison hesitated, then spoke with the precision of a man who had rehearsed these thoughts for years. Thomas was assigned to a 4-person special operations team led by a female operator codenamed Ghost. They were inserted into mountain terrain near the Pakistan border to extract a high-value intelligence asset. Something went wrong. 3 operators died. 1 survived to complete the mission. That's the sanitized version, Emma confirmed, neither confirming nor denying her identity as Ghost. The version that protects reputations at the expense of truth. And the truth? Harrison asked, desperation edging his voice. Emma studied him for a long moment, weighing her response. This man had spent 5 years tormenting her, yet his motivation stemmed from the same grief that had driven her into isolation. If anyone deserved the truth about Thomas, it was the uncle who had raised him after his parents' deaths. The truth, she began, voice dropping to ensure privacy, is that we were betrayed. The intelligence asset was a double agent working for a terrorist network. The extraction point was an ambush. Thomas took a sniper round protecting our communications specialist. Michael died covering our retreat. Benjamin bled out during our exfiltration attempt. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes reflected the horror of memories she had suppressed for years. Harrison absorbed this information, his expression shifting from suspicion to shock. A double agent? Did the CIA know? Someone knew, Emma stated flatly. The intelligence packet we recovered contained communications suggesting foreknowledge of the risk. Someone higher up deemed the potential intelligence worth the potential casualties. The implication hung between them. Faceless bureaucrats gambling with operators' lives from the safety of offices thousands of miles from danger. Harrison sank into the chair opposite Emma's desk, the antagonism of 5 years dissolving into shared grief. I was intelligence division, he admitted. Not directly involved with Iron Shield, but part of the system that sent you there. When Thomas died, I requested transfer to Fort Benning. Couldn't stomach the work anymore. Emma nodded once, understanding the weight of his confession. We all carry our ghosts, Captain. When you arrived at the base, Harrison continued, something about you triggered my instincts. Couldn't place it until I finally accessed the unredacted photographs this morning. You were there when Thomas died. I was there, Emma confirmed quietly. I held pressure on his wound while he told me about the uncle who taught him to fish on Lake Lanier, how he wanted to build a cabin there after his service ended. Her voice faltered slightly. His last words were about you. Tell Uncle Will I finished the mission. Then he was gone. Harrison's composure broke, 5 years of contained grief finally finding release. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as Emma watched, her own expression reflecting the pain she had carried since that blood-soaked mountainside. I couldn't bring him home, she continued after Harrison had regained control. Taliban forces cut off our escape route. I had to leave them, Thomas, Michael, Benjamin, to complete the mission. Their bodies were never recovered. The admission carried the weight of her deepest failure, the decision that had haunted her every day since Afghanistan. You survived to expose the betrayal, Harrison said, understanding dawning in his reddened eyes. To make their deaths mean something. Emma's expression hardened. I survived to expose nothing. When I submitted my report detailing the intelligence failure, it disappeared into classifications so deep even I can't access it now. The men who sent us to die received promotions. The families received redacted death certificates. The system protected itself. Harrison recognized the bitter truth in her assessment. As intelligence officer, he had witnessed the bureaucracy's self-preservation instincts firsthand. So you disappeared, became Emma Lawson, civilian armorer. I ensure weapons function properly, she replied simply. So no other operator dies because equipment fails when it matters most. It's the only service I have left to offer. The office fell silent as both veterans contemplated the twisted path that had led them to this moment. Harrison pursuing the woman he blamed for his nephew's death, only to discover a fellow victim of the system he had once served. I've spent 5 years hating you, Harrison admitted finally. 5 years trying to break you. And all this time we've been carrying the same weight, Emma finished for him. Different sides of the same loss. Before Harrison could respond, a knock at the door broke the moment of connection. Wilson entered without waiting for permission, his expression grave. Captain Harrison, Ms. Lawson, he acknowledged formally. I need to inform you that Colonel Hayes has requested your presence at headquarters immediately. Both of you. Emma and Harrison exchanged glances, mutual wariness replacing their brief understanding. What's this about, Colonel? Harrison asked, military formality reasserting itself. Wilson chose his words carefully. New information regarding Operation Iron Shield has emerged. Information that concerns both of you. Emma's expression closed immediately, the operator's instinct for self-preservation overriding her momentary openness. I have no connection to any operation by that designation. With respect, Chief Lawson, Wilson replied, deliberately using her former rank. This pretense serves neither you nor the memory of your team. Colonel Hayes has Level 10 clearance and has accessed the unredacted files. She believes it's time for truth, for everyone's sake. The use of her rank confirmed Emma's suspicions that her identity had been compromised at the highest levels. She weighed her options quickly, calculating risk against potential benefit with the tactical precision that had once made her legendary among special operators. When? She asked simply. Now, Wilson answered. Transportation is waiting. Emma and Harrison followed Wilson from the armory, their shared history creating an unexpected alliance against whatever revelation awaited them. As they departed, Frank Carter watched with the knowing expression of a veteran who recognized watershed moments when they occurred. The vehicle transported them to Fort Benning's headquarters complex in silence, each passenger absorbed in private thoughts. Emma maintained tactical awareness out of habit, noting routes, potential extraction points, security measures, operational assessments she couldn't suppress despite 5 years of civilian life. Colonel Catherine Hayes waited in a secure conference room, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her no-nonsense expression. At 62, Hayes carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect rather than requesting it. Beside her stood a man whose presence caused Emma's breath to catch in her throat. "Hello, Ghost," said Michael Rivera, 5 years older than when she had last seen him bleeding out on an Afghan mountainside. Emma's training prevented visible reaction, but her mind processed impossibilities with combat-honed speed. Michael Rivera, her communications specialist, her teammate, her friend, stood before her with a face older than she remembered, but unmistakably alive. The scar that now traced his left cheekbone was new, as was the slight favor he gave his right leg. But the eyes remained unchanged, dark, intelligent, and currently watching her with apprehension. "You're dead," Emma stated flatly, emotions locked behind operational discipline. Rivera's mouth quirked in the half-smile she remembered from countless missions. "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, though not by much." Harrison stared at Rivera with naked shock. "You served with Thomas, on Ghost Team." Rivera nodded once, his expression sobering. "Senior Petty Officer Michael Rivera, Communications Specialist for Ghost Team, officially killed in action during Operation Iron Shield." He gestured to his very much alive body. Obviously, that wasn't entirely accurate. Emma remained perfectly still, processing implications with tactical precision. If Rivera had survived, officially listed as KIA but actually alive, the deception required high-level authorization, which meant, "Who else?" she asked, voice dangerously controlled. Colonel Hayes answered, recognizing the potential volatility of the situation. "Petty Officer Rivera was the only survivor besides yourself, Chief Lawson. Operators Anderson and Clark were confirmed KIA. Their remains eventually recovered during a later operation." The confirmation that Thomas and Benjamin were truly gone prevented emotional collapse. But Emma's mind still raced through scenarios and betrayals. 5 years, she said, focusing on Rivera. 5 years believing you died on that mountain. 5 years carrying your name on my skin and in my nightmares. Rivera's composure cracked slightly, guilt evident in his expression. "It wasn't my choice, Chief. I was as surprised to wake up in Bagram as you are to see me now." Hayes interjected before emotion could overwhelm protocol. "Perhaps we should start at the beginning, please. Be seated." The group arranged themselves around the conference table, Emma positioning herself to maintain sightlines to both exits, habits impossible to break. Rivera sat opposite her, while Harrison and Wilson flanked them like opposing counsel at a trial. Hayes activated security protocols that sealed the room electronically before beginning. "What I'm about to share remains classified at the highest levels. Disclosure outside this room constitutes treason under national security directives." She waited for acknowledgement from each person before continuing. "Operation Iron Shield was compromised from its inception," Hayes stated, clinical detachment masking the horror of her words. "The intelligence asset, codenamed Jackknife, was indeed working for terrorist networks while providing just enough actionable intelligence to maintain CIA support." Emma's expression hardened. "We knew that part. We figured it out while bleeding out on a mountainside." Hayes nodded grimly. "What you couldn't have known was that certain elements within intelligence division suspected Jackknife's duplicity before your team was inserted." Harrison's head snapped up, disbelief warring with growing comprehension. "They sent the team in knowing it might be an ambush?" "They sent the team in because it might be an ambush," Hayes corrected, disgust briefly breaking through her professional demeanor. "Ghost Team was considered expendable in service of a larger objective, confirming Jackknife's loyalty one way or another." The revelation hung in the air like a live grenade, its implications devastating to everything Emma had believed about her final mission. She had assumed incompetence or bureaucratic indifference. The reality, deliberate sacrifice of operators for intelligence games, struck deeper than any physical wound she had sustained. "Who authorized it?" Emma asked, voice deadly quiet. Hayes met her gaze directly. "The operation received joint authorization from CIA Operations Director and Deputy Secretary of Defense, Richard Palmer." Harrison absorbed this information with growing horror. Palmer was my direct superior. He signed Thomas's condolence letter. Palmer remains in his position, Hayes continued, subsequently promoted for his decisive leadership during counterterrorism operations. Emma's control nearly shattered at this final injustice, but Rivera spoke before she could respond. I was recovered by CIA assets operating independently from Palmer's authority, he explained, addressing Emma directly. Critical injuries, multiple surgeries. When I regained consciousness 3 weeks later, I was informed that the official record listed me as KIA for operational security. Operational security, Emma repeated, infusing the words with contempt. While I live with the guilt of leaving you behind. Rivera's expression reflected genuine remorse. I fought to contact you, was denied at every level, eventually placed in a specialized recovery program for operators whose identities required protection. He hesitated, then added, they told me you'd resigned your commission and disappeared. By the time I gained enough authority to search for you independently, your trail had gone cold. Emma processed this information with the compartmentalization that had kept her functional through countless high-stress operations. One section of her mind cataloged the betrayal by command structure. Another analyzed Rivera's explanation for inconsistencies, while a third calculated the implications for her carefully constructed civilian identity. Why now, she asked finally, addressing Hayes rather than Rivera. Why expose this after 5 years of classification? Hayes exchanged glances with Wilson before answering. Because Operation Iron Shield wasn't an isolated incident. The same pattern has emerged in recent operations. Teams inserted with questionable intelligence, casualties dismissed as operational necessity, survivors silenced through classification or reassignment. Phoenix Dawn, Rivera interjected, leaning forward with intensity. A shadow organization operating within legitimate intelligence structures. Palmer is connected, though we haven't confirmed he's leadership. Emma's tactical mind immediately shifted to this new threat assessment. Evidence? Patterns of deployment, casualty reports, funding discrepancies, Rivera explained. I've spent 3 years building the case while operating under deep cover within intelligence communities. And now you need me, Emma concluded, connecting the unspoken dots. That's why you've exposed this operation after 5 years of classification. You need Ghost. Hayes neither confirmed nor denied the assessment. What we need is justice for the operators sacrificed for political games. Anderson, Clark, and dozens of others whose deaths were preventable but convenient. Emma turned to Harrison, whose expression had transformed during the revelations, grief giving way to cold fury as he processed his unwitting connection to his nephew's killers. Did you know? She asked directly. Any suspicion about Palmer or Operation Iron Shield's true nature? Harrison shook his head, self-recrimination evident in his features. I trusted the system, believed in the chain of command. Even after Thomas died, I suspected tactical failure or bad luck, not deliberate sacrifice. His voice hardened. I've spent 5 years blaming you when I should have been investigating my own superiors. Palmer remains untouchable through conventional channels, Hayes continued. His position, political connections, and classification authority create perfect insulation from accountability. So what exactly are you proposing? Emma asked, professional detachment masking the emotional turmoil beneath. Vigilante justice? Assassination? Those aren't solutions. They're crimes that dishonor the sacrifices already made. Rivera leaned forward, intensity radiating from his posture. We're proposing something more subtle. Palmer and Phoenix Dawn are planning their next operation, another team of operators to be sacrificed for intelligence value. We can expose them, but only with evidence that can't be classified or buried. Evidence I supposedly have? Emma's skepticism was evident. Evidence we can obtain, Rivera corrected, with the right team. The implication hung between them, a team including the legendary Ghost, whose tactical innovations had revolutionized special operations methodology. Emma had spent 5 years burying that identity, yet here it stood before her, offering purpose beyond penance. Hayes allowed silence to stretch, understanding that Emma required time to process implications and options. Finally, she spoke with careful precision. We're not asking you to return to operational status, Chief Lawson. Your expertise in planning and tactical assessment would be consultative only. Emma's laugh held no humor. Convenient distinctions to preserve deniability. The same bureaucratic language that sent my team to die in mountains halfway around the world. The difference, Rivera interjected, is that this operation serves the operators, not the system that betrayed them. This is for Thomas and Benjamin, for everyone's sacrifice to political expedience. Emma rose from her chair, the controlled energy of a predator evident in her movement. I need time to consider, and verification of everything you've shared today. Hayes nodded her understanding. 24 hours. The evidence package will be delivered to your residence this evening. After that, operational security requires decision. As Emma turned to leave, Rivera spoke again, voice pitched for her ears alone. I've carried my own ghosts, Chief. Running doesn't silence them. Only justice does. Emma offered no response as she departed, mind already calculating probabilities, risks, and the potential cost of returning to the world she had abandoned. Behind her, Harrison, Wilson, Hayes, and Rivera exchanged glances. Four veterans who recognized the internal battle occurring behind Emma's carefully controlled exterior. Outside headquarters, Emma bypassed the offered transportation, choosing instead to walk perimeter roads that offered solitude and tactical awareness. 5 years of carefully constructed identity threatened to collapse around her, exposing the operator she had buried beneath civilian routine. The revelations cascaded through her consciousness. Rivera alive after years of guilt-ridden mourning. Thomas and Benjamin confirmed dead, their bodies eventually recovered without her knowledge. Operation Iron Shield deliberately compromised by the very command structure she had trusted with her team's lives. And now the request to return, not to active duty, but to the shadowy world between official sanction and personal vendetta. Hayes had framed it as justice, Rivera as obligation to fallen comrades. Both appealed to the operator Emma had once been, the ghost whose legendary status had been earned through unwavering commitment to mission and team. Emma's feet found familiar rhythm as she processed options with tactical precision. Accept Hayes's proposal and risk everything she had built since Afghanistan. Refuse and abandon her final opportunity for justice for Thomas and Benjamin. Neither choice offered perfect resolution. Both carried potential for further damage to her carefully constructed stability. As sunset painted Fort Benning in amber light, Emma reached her decision. Not through emotion or obligation, but through the cold calculation that had once made her the ghost of Coronado, the tactical assessment of mission parameters, risk factors, and acceptable casualties. In her apartment that evening, Emma opened the evidence package Hayes had promised, classified documents, surveillance photographs, financial records tracing Phoenix Dawn's operations through shell corporations and black budget allocations. The evidence against Palmer appeared circumstantial individually but damning collectively, a pattern of deliberate sacrifice of operators for political and financial gain. Emma recognized the operation developing in the most recent documents, a 4-person team scheduled for insertion into territory controlled by terrorists with connections to Palmer's private security interests. The mission parameters mirrored White Iron Shield with frightening precision. High-value intelligence asset, minimal support, deniable objectives. 4 more operators being sent to die, their sacrifices already calculated as acceptable losses. Emma closed the file and moved to the case beneath her bed, retrieving the sealed trident with its 3 etched names. For 5 years she had carried guilt as penance, believing her survival represented failure rather than opportunity. Now, with Rivera's return and Palmer's continued operations, the equation had changed. Her phone rang. A secure line provided in Hayes's package. Emma answered without preamble. I'm in, she said simply, but we do this my way. Morning arrived with renewed purpose. Emma completed her ritual run with different energy, not penance but preparation, each stride recalibrating muscles for operational demands rather than memorial obligation. In her apartment, she opened a locked storage unit untouched for 5 years, revealing equipment that connected to her former identity. Tactical gear, specialized tools, communication devices designed for covert operations. The ghost prepared to emerge from self-imposed exile. At the arranged meeting point, a nondescript warehouse on Fort Benning's outskirts, Emma found Hayes, Wilson, Rivera, and Harrison waiting. The tension in the air reflected the gravity of their unofficial operation and the personal histories that complicated their alliance. "You came," Rivera observed, relief evident beneath his professional composure. Emma nodded once, her demeanor transformed from the civilian armorer her colleagues knew. She moved with the contained energy of an operator on mission, each gesture economical, eyes constantly assessing environment and personnel with tactical precision. "I reviewed the evidence," she stated without preamble. "Palmer's operation mirrors Iron Shield in structure and probable outcome. 4 operators being sent into compromised territory with inadequate intelligence and extraction protocols." Hayes nodded grimly. "Team Alpha, scheduled for insertion 3 days from now. Palmer personally selected them based on what he calls expendability metrics, operators whose loss would create minimal political fallout." Emma's expression hardened. "No operator is expendable." "Agreed," Wilson interjected, "which is why we need to act quickly. Once Team Alpha crosses into operational theater, Palmer's plausible deniability increases exponentially." Harrison, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward with the focused intensity Emma recognized from intelligence officers preparing mission briefs. "I've analyzed Palmer's communication patterns. He maintains irregular contact with a private security contractor, Sentinel Group, operating in the same region as Team Alpha's insertion point. Sentinel provides deniable assets for operations that exceed legal parameters," Rivera explained, "including eliminating witnesses who might expose Phoenix Dawn's activities." Emma absorbed this information, tactical mind mapping connections and vulnerabilities. "What's our objective? Prevention of Team Alpha's deployment or exposure of Palmer's connection to Phoenix Dawn?" "Both," Hayes answered. "We need evidence that can't be classified or buried, proof that reaches oversight committees before Palmer can activate containment protocols." Emma considered the parameters with the strategic assessment that had once made her an exceptional team leader. Direct confrontation with Palmer is counterproductive. He's insulated by position and political connections. Our target should be the evidence chain connecting him to Phoenix Dawn and Sentinel. Rivera nodded his agreement. Financial records indicate monthly transfers between Palmer's family foundation and offshore accounts linked to Sentinel's operational fund. The transfers coincide with Phoenix Dawn operations, resulting in operator casualties. "Following the money," Wilson confirmed. "Classic intelligence methodology." Emma moved to the tactical display Rivera had prepared, studying the flowcharts connecting Palmer to various shell corporations and operational assets. Her finger traced the most vulnerable connection point. "Here," she said with quiet certainty, "Palmer's chief financial officer, Elliot Grant. Civilian contractor managing the foundation's accounts. He's outside military classification authority, but has access to the complete financial structure." Harrison leaned closer, professional respect evident in his expression. "Grant maintains offices in Atlanta, minimal security, standard corporate protocols." "Can we turn him?" Hayes asked, considering options. Emma shook her head. "Too risky. Grant's been with Palmer for 15 years. Personal loyalty likely overrides self-preservation. We need direct access to his records without alerting him to our interest." The group fell silent, contemplating the logistical and legal challenges of obtaining financial records from a civilian target without official sanction. "I might have a solution," Wilson offered finally. "My role as liaison officer includes auditing joint military-civilian contract operations. I could request review of Palmer's foundation based on its military donations program. Official cover for unofficial intelligence gathering," Rivera observed with grudging admiration. "Palmer would recognize the threat immediately. Not if the request comes through standard channels with appropriate bureaucratic camouflage," Wilson countered. "A routine compliance review generates thousands of documents. Finding specific incriminating evidence would require foreknowledge of what to look for." Emma considered the approach with tactical assessment. Timeline? 48 hours to initiate review process. Another 24 to access Grant's records. Total 72 hours operational window. Team Alpha deploys in 72 hours. Hayes reminded them. "We need acceleration." Emma's expression remained impassive, but her mind calculated options with combat-honed precision. "We need 2 operational tracks. Wilson pursues official channels to access Grant's records. Simultaneously, we develop alternative acquisition methods as contingency." Harrison recognized the implication immediately. You're suggesting unauthorized access to a civilian target. I'm suggesting insurance against bureaucratic delay, Emma corrected. Team Alpha's lives depend on timely intervention. We prepare for all contingencies. The room fell silent as the veterans contemplated crossing lines between lawful investigation and the moral imperative to protect fellow operators from deliberate sacrifice. Each weighed professional oath against ethical obligation, personal risk against the lives at stake. Hayes broke the silence with the authority of command decision. Wilson initiates official review through proper channels. Harrison and I maintain legitimate operational cover and plausible deniability. Chief Lawson and Senior Rivera develop contingency response options without official sanction or support. And the structure provided essential fire breaks, compartmentalization that protected the official investigation from potential contamination by unofficial methods. It also isolated Emma and Rivera as deniable assets should the operation face exposure or failure. Emma recognized the tactical logic while noting the familiar pattern. Operators accepting highest risk while command maintained distance from potential consequences. The very system they sought to expose replicating itself in their response. Understood, she acknowledged, accepting the parameters with professional detachment. Rivera and I will establish separate communications protocol and operational timeline. As Hayes and Wilson departed to initiate official channels, Harrison lingered, conflict evident in his expression. 5 years of antagonism toward Emma had transformed overnight into reluctant partnership, their shared connection to Thomas creating unexpected alliance. I should be part of the contingency team, Harrison stated, military precision masking emotional investment. Thomas was my nephew. I have intelligence background and operational experience. Emma assessed him with the objective evaluation of a team leader rather than the defensive wariness of recent adversary. Your current position provides essential access and influence within official channels. That's where you create maximum operational value. Harrison recognized the tactical truth in her assessment, though his expression revealed frustration at being excluded from direct action. Palmer was my superior officer. I served the system that sacrificed Thomas and your team. I need to make that right. You are, Emma replied with unexpected gentleness, by ensuring the system finally serves justice rather than self-preservation. After Harrison's departure, Emma and Rivera found themselves alone for the first time since Afghanistan, two ghosts reunited by shared mission and unresolved history. The silence between them carried the weight of 5 years' separation and the deaths that had severed their team. I searched for you, Rivera said finally, breaking the professional distance they had maintained in others' presence. After recovery and debriefing, I tried to locate you through official channels. When that failed, I used personal resources, called in favors from operators still in the field. Emma's expression revealed nothing, but her response acknowledged the effort. I didn't want to be found. I figured that out eventually, Rivera admitted. The ghost disappearing was no accident. You engineered your extraction from the system with the same precision you brought to operations. The system failed Thomas and Benjamin, Emma stated flatly. Failed all of us. There was nothing left to serve. Rivera moved closer, his expression revealing the personal cost behind professional composure. We were a team, Chief. When I woke up in that hospital with half my body reconstructed, the doctor said my first coherent words were asking about you, whether you made it out. Emma's carefully maintained control wavered slightly, memories of the mountain extraction surfacing despite years of compartmentalization. I saw you take fire covering our retreat. Confirmed no vital signs before continuing mission. I left you there, Michael. You completed the mission, Rivera corrected. Retrieved the intelligence package, made extraction despite critical injuries. Did exactly what our training required when operational objectives conflicted with personal loyalty. The absolution Rivera offered struck deeper than Harrison's accusations ever had. Emma had prepared defenses against blame, but found herself vulnerable to forgiveness. I should have found a way to bring you all home, she insisted, the guilt of 5 years evident beneath her professional demeanor. Rivera shook his head. There was no extraction option that included our bodies, Chief, you know that. Tactical assessment required prioritizing intelligence package over fallen operators. You made the right call. Emma turned away, unable to accept the comfort Rivera offered. Tell that to Thomas and Benjamin. Tell that to Harrison, who spent 5 years blaming me for his nephew's death. I'm telling you, Rivera said quietly, the only one still carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you. Emma redirected conversation to operational concerns, unwilling to address the emotional weight Rivera's return had placed on her carefully constructed defenses. We need contingency plans for accessing Grant's financial records if Wilson's official approach fails or faces delays. Rivera allowed the deflection, recognizing Emma's need to maintain professional distance. They spent the next hours developing infiltration scenarios for Grant's Atlanta office, evaluating security systems, personnel patterns, and technical vulnerabilities. The familiar rhythm of operational planning created structure around the unresolved emotions their reunion had surfaced. By evening, they had established comprehensive contingency protocols, civilian disguises, technical requirements, extraction routes, and communication procedures isolated from official channels. The planning reflected their years of operational partnership, each anticipating the other's thought processes with precision born of shared experience. As they concluded preparations, Rivera broached the subject both had carefully avoided throughout their tactical discussions. Palmer needs to face justice for what happened to Thomas and Benjamin, he stated, watching Emma's reaction carefully. But vengeance isn't justice. If we cross that line, we become what we're fighting against. Emma met his gaze directly. I'm not interested in vengeance. I want accountability. The system acknowledging its failure rather than burying it beneath classification. And if the system protects itself again, Rivera pressed, if Palmer escapes accountability through political connections or bureaucratic manipulation. The question exposed the fundamental uncertainty at the operation's core, whether justice remained possible within a system designed to protect itself at all costs. Emma had abandoned that system precisely because she no longer believed in its capacity for self-correction. Then we ensure the evidence reaches public channels beyond classification authority, she answered finally. The objective remains exposure and accountability, not personal retribution. Rivera studied her with the knowing assessment of someone who had operated alongside her through countless high-risk missions. 5 years ago, I would have believed that without question. Now I need to know if Ghost is back for justice or vengeance. Emma recognized the legitimate concern behind his question. 5 years of isolation had changed her. Hardened edges already sharp from combat experience. The Ghost who had emerged from self-imposed exile carried wounds different from those Rivera remembered. I spent 5 years blaming myself for decisions made by others, she said finally. Running 3 miles every morning as penance for surviving when my team didn't. That ends now. This operation isn't about revenge. It's about honoring Thomas and Benjamin by ensuring no other operators die for political convenience. The sincerity in her response appeared to satisfy Rivera, who nodded once before gathering his equipment. Get some rest, Chief. Tomorrow we shadow Wilson's official approach. Prepare to implement contingency if necessary. After Rivera's departure, Emma returned to her apartment, the day's revelations and operational planning having reawakened tactical awareness dormant for 5 years. She conducted security checks with combat-honed precision, verified communication devices, and prepared equipment for potential deployment to Atlanta. The familiar routine of mission preparation provided structure around emotional turmoil. Rivera's return had shattered fundamental assumptions that had defined her existence since Afghanistan. The guilt of abandoning him, believing him dead when he had actually survived, complicated her already fragile reconciliation with the past. As Emma completed equipment checks, her phone signaled an encrypted message from Harrison. Wilson's request flagged by Palmer's office. Official approach compromised. Accelerated timeline required. The warning confirmed Emma's tactical assessment. Bureaucratic channels offered insufficient speed and security when targeting those who controlled those very systems. The contingency she and Rivera had developed would now become primary operational approach. Emma sent coded acknowledgement, then contacted Rivera through secure channels established during their planning session. Contingency active, she stated without preamble. Wheels up 0600 tomorrow. Rivera's response came immediately, reflecting the operational readiness that had once defined their partnership. Confirmed, equipment and transportation prepared. As Emma conducted final preparations, She found herself removing the sealed trident from its case, the three names etched into its surface catching light as she turned it in her palm. Thomas Anderson, Michael Rivera, Benjamin Clark. For 5 years, she had carried all three as equal weight, equal loss. Now, with Rivera's return, the equation had shifted. Possibility replacing certainty, action replacing penance. Emma secured the trident in her tactical vest, no longer memorial, but mission focus. Tomorrow would bring operational demands requiring the ghost's legendary skills. Tonight required preparation, physical, tactical, and psychological. As she completed final equipment check, Emma's phone signaled another encrypted message. Not from Rivera or Harrison, but from an unknown source using recognition codes known only to Ghost Team members. The Dead watch over their own, Storage Unit 23, Columbus Facility, code Iron Shield. The message's origin remained unidentified, but the recognition code suggested legitimate connection to her former team. Emma's tactical assessment identified potential security breach, but also possible asset activation outside official channels. Decision required balancing operational security against potential intelligence value. After careful consideration, Emma initiated counter-surveillance protocols and proceeded to the location, maintaining tactical awareness throughout approach. The storage facility on Columbus's industrial outskirts appeared deserted at midnight, security systems minimal and easily bypassed with Emma's specialized equipment. Unit 23 featured reinforced door with electronic lock requiring 8-digit code. Emma entered iron CHLD, maintaining defensive posture as locks disengaged. Inside, a single case occupied otherwise empty space. Military grade, biometric security, no identifying markings. Emma conducted thorough security sweep before approaching, detecting no surveillance devices or explosive components. The case's biometric scanner activated as she approached, suggesting personalized security protocol. Emma placed her palm against the reader, calculated risk against potential intelligence value, and accepted security verification. The lock disengaged with hydraulic hiss, revealing contents that stopped Emma's breath momentarily. Specialized equipment she recognized immediately. Custom-modified weapon systems designed specifically for Ghost Team operations. Tactical gear bearing no identification, but configured to her exact specifications. Communication devices operating on frequencies outside standard military monitoring. Equipment prepared by someone with intimate knowledge of Ghost Team operational requirements and Emma's personal preferences. Equipment that would prove essential for contingency operations against targets with intelligence community connections. Beneath the equipment, Emma found a single document, operational directive on paper that could not be electronically tracked or monitored. The message was brief but unambiguous. Phoenix Dawn monitoring official channels. Palmer aware of investigation. Team Alpha deployment accelerated to 0600 tomorrow. Ghost Team reactivation authorized by independent command. Complete the mission. The signature line contained only 2 words that confirmed legitimacy while complicating operational parameters. Thomas lives. The message burned in Emma's mind like white phosphorus. Thomas lives. 2 words that shattered reality as completely as Rivera's resurrection had days earlier. 2 words that transformed grief into desperate possibility, certainty into question. 2 words that could be salvation or manipulation, truth or elaborate trap. Emma's tactical mind cataloged possibilities with cold precision. Potential Scenario 1, legitimate message from Thomas Anderson, somehow surviving the operation that claimed Benjamin Clark's life. Potential Scenario 2, psychological operation designed by Palmer to destabilize investigation into Phoenix Dawn. Potential Scenario 3, bait for ambush targeting the remaining members of Ghost Team. No conclusive evidence supported any single scenario. The recognition codes suggested insider knowledge, but such information could be extracted through interrogation or recovered from classified files. The equipment specifications matched Ghost Team parameters, but again, such details could be replicated by intelligence professionals with access to operational history. Emma secured the equipment case and exited the storage facility, maintaining counter-surveillance protocols throughout her return journey. Her apartment felt suddenly vulnerable, a civilian space inadequate for operational security requirements. She conducted thorough sweep for surveillance devices, established additional perimeter alerts, and prepared defensive positions with the methodical precision that had once defined her operational career. Sleep remained elusive as Emma processed implications through the night. If Thomas lived, everything changed. Mission parameters, operational objectives, personal obligations. If Thomas lived, Harrison deserved immediate notification despite operational security risks. If Thomas lived, Emma's tactical assessment identified emotional vulnerability, threatening objective analysis. She compartmentalized ruthlessly, focusing on verifiable facts rather than desperate hope. Thomas Anderson had been confirmed KIA through multiple sources, including Colonel Hayes's briefing. The message provided no verification beyond recognition codes that could be compromised. The mission to expose Palmer remained priority regardless of Thomas's status, living or dead. Dawn approached with no resolution to the central question, only hardened determination to complete the mission that might provide answers. Emma contacted Rivera through secure channels established during their planning. "Proceed as scheduled," she instructed, revealing nothing of the night's developments. "Additional equipment acquired. Meet at extraction point Alpha 0600. Rivera's acknowledgement came without question, their operational partnership requiring trust without complete transparency. Emma prepared her newly acquired equipment, noting the modifications that perfectly matched her operational preferences. Customized grip on the tactical knife, communication devices configured to her specifications, body armor cut to accommodate her movement patterns. Equipment prepared by someone with intimate knowledge of her operational requirements. At the designated extraction point, an abandoned service station outside Columbus, Emma found Rivera waiting with the nondescript vehicle they had selected for the Atlanta operation. His expression revealed nothing as he observed her enhanced equipment, but his tactical assessment was evident in his careful inspection. "New toys," he observed neutrally. "Care to share the source?" "Anonymous delivery," Emma replied, revealing partial truth while maintaining operational security. "Recognition codes match Ghost Team protocols." Rivera accepted this limited explanation with professional understanding, recognizing the compartmentalization essential to special operations. Wilson reports Palmer has accelerated Team Alpha's deployment. Wheels up 1,200 hours today. Emma processed this information with tactical precision. Accelerated timeline requires immediate implementation of contingency plan. Grant's office maintains standard business hours. We have limited window to access financial records before Team Alpha crosses into operational theater. The 3-hour drive to Atlanta passed in focused preparation, reviewing building schematics, security protocols, personnel patterns, and extraction routes. Emma and Rivera communicated with the efficient minimalism of experienced operators, each anticipation contributing to operational success. Atlanta's Midtown District presented the controlled chaos of urban environment, civilian population providing both cover and complication, corporate security systems creating obstacles and opportunities. Grant's office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower housing multiple financial services firms, its legitimate business operations providing cover for Palmer's more questionable transactions. Emma and Rivera approached separately, utilizing civilian disguises that aligned with the building's professional environment. Emma's transformation from military contractor to corporate consultant appeared seamless. Tailored business attire, professional demeanor, identification badge replicating legitimate credentials. Rivera established position in adjacent building with observation equipment and communication support, providing overwatch and extraction coordination. The infiltration proceeded according to established protocol, Emma accessing the building through legitimate channels, utilizing corporate environment's inherent anonymity to reach targeted floor without security challenges. Grant's office suite maintained reception area with civilian security, identification verification, visitor management system, standard corporate protocols, rather than enhanced defensive measures. Emma presented fabricated credentials identifying her as compliance auditor from partner firm, utilizing corporate language and bureaucratic authority to navigate initial barriers. The receptionist, young, inexperienced, unprepared for confident, professional, presenting, legitimate appearing credentials, provided access with minimal verification. "Mr. Grant is currently in conference," she informed Emma, checking appointment system with growing confusion. "I don't see your audit scheduled." "The notification would have come through compliance channels," Emma explained with practiced authority. Department-level communication rather than individual appointment. Standard quarterly review protocol. The explanation, delivered with professional confidence rather than defensive justification, achieved desired effect. The receptionist directed Emma to a small conference room used for audit purposes, providing access to networked computer terminal with appropriate permissions for financial review. Mr. Grant should be available within 30 minutes, she advised. Would you like coffee while waiting? Emma accepted the offer, recognizing that expected behaviors reduce suspicion more effectively than unnecessary deviation. Alone in the conference room, she activated specialized equipment concealed within her professional portfolio, with devices designed to bypass corporate security and access protected financial records without triggering system alerts. Rivera maintained communication through discreet earpiece, providing updates on external security and Grant's movements tracked through building management systems accessed through their preliminary cyber infiltration. Grant's meeting scheduled for another 45 minutes. Security conducting standard rounds on 12 and 16, 14 currently clear. Emma acknowledged with subvocal confirmation as she navigated Grant's financial systems. The specialized equipment, part of the mysterious delivery from the storage facility, performed with exceptional efficiency, bypassing security protocols that would have challenged standard infiltration technology. Emma's search algorithms identified patterns consistent with their intelligence assessment, regular transfers from Palmer's Foundation to offshore accounts linked to Sentinel Group operations. Confirmation on financial connection, Emma reported as data accumulated on secure storage device. Monthly transfers corresponding to Phoenix Dawn operational timeline. Amounts consistent with estimated costs for deniable assets and operational support. Time check, Rivera reminded. 20 minutes until scheduled meeting conclusion. Security approaching 14th floor for standard patrol. Emma accelerated data acquisition, focusing on records directly connecting Palmer to Ghost Team's compromise operation and Team Alpha's imminent deployment. The financial patterns revealed systematic process, funds transferred before operations, bonuses processed after confirmed casualties, compensation packages for families calibrated to maintain silence without raising suspicion. The evidence accumulated with damning precision, not merely circumstantial connections, but direct financial trails linking Palmer to operational compromises resulting in operator casualties. Emma's tactical assessment confirmed sufficient evidence to trigger congressional oversight and potential criminal prosecution, assuming delivery through channels beyond Palmer's classification authority. Security on floor, Rivera warned. Standard patrol, but duration in your sector extending beyond normal parameters. Emma continued data acquisition while preparing extraction contingencies. The security anomaly might represent standard deviation or potential compromise. Either scenario required completed mission and secure extraction. Grant's meeting concluded, Rivera updated. Currently returning to office suite. Arrival estimated 3 minutes. Emma completed data transfer and disconnected infiltration equipment, returning terminal to standard configuration while preparing alternative extraction route. The mission objectives had been achieved. Evidence secured connecting Palmer to Phoenix Dawn and operator casualties. Remaining priorities shifted to extraction without compromise. As Emma prepared to exit conference room, Rivera's urgent communication stopped her movement. Unknown operative approaching office suite. Profile matches specialized security rather than standard corporate protocol. The warning confirmed Emma's tactical concern. Their operation had triggered security response outside standard parameters. Palmer's connection to intelligence community provided access to resources beyond corporate security, including specialized personnel trained in counterintelligence operations. Extraction route compromised? Emma asked, already calculating alternatives. Primary and secondary routes showing increased security presence, Rivera confirmed, implementing Contingency Delta. Contingency Delta represented highest risk extraction, utilizing building infrastructure rather than conventional exit routes, bypassing security through maintenance systems and structural vulnerabilities identified during operational planning. Emma proceeded to designated access point, utility closet connecting to building maintenance shaft, while maintaining civilian cover appearance. As she approached extraction point, elevator doors opened, revealing 2 men whose appearance immediately triggered Emma's threat assessment. Despite civilian attire, their movement patterns, tactical awareness, and physical positioning, identified them as specialized security with probable military or intelligence background. Emma maintained course with careful body language calibrated to project civilian obliviousness rather than operational awareness. The security operatives scanned the corridor with professional assessment, their attention focusing briefly on Emma before continuing systematic sweep of the environment. Security assets deployed on 14, Emma subvocalized as she passed the operatives without acknowledgement. Profile suggests Phoenix Dawn response team rather than standard corporate security. Confirmed, Rivera replied. Similar assets identified at primary extraction points. Palmer appears to have activated specialized resources. The development escalated threat assessment from corporate security evasion to counterintelligence operation. Palmer had apparently detected their investigation despite compartmentalized approach and deployed assets with capabilities matching Ghost Team's operational training. Emma reached utility closet and accessed maintenance shaft as planned, transitioning from corporate disguise to movement optimized for infrastructure navigation. The building's maintenance system provided access routes outside conventional security monitoring, though physical challenges replaced electronic surveillance. Narrow passages, vertical climbs, and mechanical obstacles requiring specialized training to navigate effectively. Palmer's response suggests compromise at command level, Emma assessed as she navigated maintenance infrastructure. Hayes or Wilson might be under surveillance. Or Harrison, Rivera suggested. His connection to Thomas gives Palmer leverage and access. The possibility complicated operational assessment. If Palmer had compromised their command structure, extraction might lead to immediate counter-operation targeting everyone connected to the investigation. Team Alpha's accelerated deployment suggested preparation for eliminating witnesses and evidence rather than standard operational timeline. Emma reached designated extraction point, service entrance connecting to loading dock with minimal security coverage, and prepared for final transition to extraction vehicle. Rivera maintained overwatch from adjacent position, coordinating approach with security patrol patterns. Extraction vehicle in position, Rivera confirmed. Security patrols passing eastern quadrant. Execute on my mark. Emma prepared for final extraction phase when Rivera's communication abruptly ceased, replaced by static indicating signal interference or equipment failure. The timing suggested deliberate countermeasure rather than technical malfunction, confirming Emma's assessment of professional opposition force. Tactical options narrowed to individual extraction without coordination support. High-risk scenario requiring immediate implementation before security assets establish complete containment. Emma proceeded through service entrance, maintaining environmental awareness as she transitioned to exterior loading dock. The extraction vehicle remained in position but showed no signs of Rivera's presence. Emma approached with caution, tactical assessment identifying potential ambush scenario. As she reached optimal distance for final approach determination, the vehicle's driver's side door opened, revealing figure whose appearance froze Emma's tactical response momentarily. Thomas Anderson emerged from the vehicle, 5 years older than when she had last held pressure against his wounds on an Afghan mountainside. The scar across his forehead was new, as was the slight asymmetry to his facial structure, suggesting reconstructive surgery. But the eyes remained unchanged, clear, determined, and currently watching her with recognition that confirmed identity beyond tactical deception capabilities. "Hello, Chief," Thomas said quietly, using the title that had once defined their operational relationship. "Sorry for the dramatic entrance, but conventional channels are compromised." Emma maintained tactical awareness despite emotional impact, assessing surroundings for potential threat while processing impossible reality before her. "Thomas, you're dead." A familiar half-smile crossed his face, the same expression he had shown before countless high-risk operations. Like Rivera, reports of my death were somewhat exaggerated, though also like Rivera, not by much. Emma's tactical mind processed implications with combat-honed precision. Thomas Anderson, alive despite multiple confirmations of his death, including Hayes's recent briefing. The message from the storage facility confirmed as legitimate contact rather than psychological operation or ambush preparation. "Rivera?" Emma asked, immediate concern shifting to her missing teammate. "Secure," Thomas assured her. "Alternative extraction implemented when Phoenix Dawn assets were identified. He's establishing secondary rendezvous point." Emma entered the vehicle while maintaining defensive awareness, recognizing the immediate priority of extraction from compromised location. Thomas accelerated from the loading dock with the precision driving skills honed through specialized military training, navigating urban environment with calculated routes designed to identify and evade potential surveillance. "You were confirmed KIA," Emma stated as they established safe distance from the target building. "Hayes verified recovery of your remains." "Hayes verified what she was told," Thomas corrected. "The remains recovered were deliberately misidentified. DNA records altered within military database to establish my death beyond question." The implications suggested resources beyond conventional military capacity, intelligence community intervention with highest level authorization. "Why?" Emma asked simply. Thomas navigated through Atlanta traffic before responding, his attention divided between operational security and explanation. "Because what we discovered in those mountains was bigger than one compromise operation. Phoenix Dawn isn't just Palmer, it's a network embedded throughout intelligence and military command structures. The only way to investigate was from outside the system." "By dying," Emma concluded, understanding the tactical approach despite its extreme nature. Thomas nodded once. "My injuries were severe, but survivable. When CIA recovery team found me, their commander made operational decision, declare me KIA to preserve investigative potential rather than return me to system already compromised by Phoenix Dawn. The same decision made for Rivera," Emma observed, connecting operational patterns. "Similar but distinct," Thomas clarified. "Rivera's survival remained classified but acknowledged within secure command channels. Mine was concealed completely, even from Rivera until 6 months ago. The revelations suggested compartmentalization beyond standard operational security, a shadow investigation operating outside conventional military and intelligence structures. The implications extended beyond Palmer to systematic corruption within the very institutions Emma had once served without question." "Hayes?" Emma asked, assessing command integrity. "Clean," Thomas confirmed, "but under surveillance since initiating official investigation into Palmer. Wilson similarly compromised. Harrison," he hesitated before continuing. "Harrison's position remains unclear. Family connection provides both vulnerability and potential asset value to Phoenix Dawn." Emma processed this assessment with growing concern for operational security. The evidence from Grant's office, financial records connecting Palmer to Phoenix Dawn operations. If command structure is compromised, secure delivery becomes problematic. Thomas nodded his understanding. "That's why conventional channels are no longer viable. We need alternative approach outside Palmer's classification authority and surveillance capabilities." "Congress?" Emma suggested, considering oversight mechanisms designed to prevent exactly the abuse of authority Phoenix Dawn represented. "Palmer has connections on intelligence committees," Thomas countered. "Classification authority sufficient to delay investigation until evidence disappears and witnesses become unavailable." Emma recognized the tactical challenge. Evidence requiring delivery through channels simultaneously powerful enough to act on its implications, yet removed from Palmer's influence network. The solution emerged from operational history rather than conventional protocols. "Media," she stated with tactical certainty, "specialized journalists with national security expertise and protected source networks. Public disclosure at sufficient scale to prevent classification containment." Thomas's expression confirmed alignment with existing operational planning. "Precisely. We have established contact with Washington Post Investigative Unit specializing in intelligence community oversight. Secure delivery protocol arranged through intermediaries outside conventional monitoring systems." The approach represented significant deviation from military operational protocols, utilizing civilian channels rather than chain of command. Yet the tactical assessment confirmed its necessity given the extent of Phoenix Dawn's penetration of conventional accountability systems. "And Team Alpha?" Emma asked, tactical focus returning to the operators currently facing deployment into compromised operation. "Their wheels up is scheduled within hours." "That's our second priority," Thomas confirmed. "Evidence secured from Grant's office provides justification for immediate intervention, but requires delivery through appropriate channels before Team Alpha crosses into operational theater." The dual objectives created tactical complexity, evidence delivery to media contacts, while simultaneously preventing Team Alpha's deployment into compromised operation. Split objectives typically required separate operational teams, yet their resources remained limited to Ghost Team's surviving members operating without official sanction or support. "Where's Rivera now?" MY asked. "Tactical assessment requiring complete resource evaluation. Establishing secure communication with our media contact," Thomas explained as he navigated toward their rendezvous point, an industrial storage facility outside Atlanta's surveillance network. "We have limited window to prevent Team Alpha's deployment while ensuring evidence reaches public channels with sufficient protection for sources." The facility appeared abandoned, weathered exterior concealing repurposed interior, established as operational center outside conventional monitoring. Rivera awaited their arrival, tactical equipment prepared for immediate deployment. His expression revealed relief at Emma's successful extraction, though professional composure quickly reasserted itself. "Phoenix Dawn deployed full counterintelligence package," he reported as they entered the facility's secure area. "Surveillance established on Hayes, Wilson, and Harrison. Palmer has accelerated operational timeline. Team Alpha departing 1,000 hours from Andrews rather than previously scheduled 1,200. The accelerated timeline confirmed Palmer's awareness of potential compromise, his response prioritizing elimination of evidence through deployment of expendable operators. Team Alpha, 4 specialized operators selected for their expendability metrics, would cross into operational theater within 90 minutes, their sacrifice already calculated as acceptable cost for maintaining Phoenix Dawn's secrecy. "Evidence package?" Thomas asked, focusing on mission priorities. Rivera indicated the secure communication equipment established in the facility's interior room. "Transmission protocols established with Washington Post contact, awaiting final verification and transmission authorization." "And Team Alpha?" Emma pressed, unwilling to sacrifice fellow operators even for the larger objective of exposing Phoenix Dawn. Thomas and Rivera exchanged glances, silent communications suggesting operational complexity beyond standard parameters. "Direct intervention presents significant challenges," Thomas acknowledged. "Andrews maintains military security protocols outside our current resource capabilities. Conventional approach would trigger immediate countermeasures. So we find unconventional approach," Emma stated, the tactical problem engaging her operational creativity. "We don't need physical intervention on site. We need communication with Team Alpha directly, operator to operator, outside command monitoring." Rivera's expression reflected skepticism. "Team Alpha's communications are monitored through standard military protocols. Any unsanctioned contact would be immediately detected." "Not if we use ghost protocols," Emma countered, referencing communication methods she had developed specifically for situations where conventional channels might be compromised. "Direct operator-to-operator connection through specialized frequencies outside standard monitoring parameters." Thomas's expression shifted from doubt to recognition. "The equipment from the storage facility, it includes ghost communication protocols?" Emma confirmed with single nod. "Customized comm package designed for exactly this scenario, reaching operators when command structure cannot be trusted." The approach presented operational risk. Communicating directly with Team Alpha required breaking operational security and revealing Ghost Team's continued existence. Yet the alternative, allowing fellow operators to deploy into deliberately compromised mission, violated the core principle that had defined Ghost Team's operational philosophy: no operator left behind. "If we warn Team Alpha, we expose ourselves," Rivera cautioned. "Palmer will know Ghost Team survived and continues operating outside official channels." "If we don't warn them, they die," Emma stated with finality. "Operational security doesn't justify sacrificing operators to protect ourselves." The statement crystallized decision parameters beyond tactical calculation. Whatever Ghost Team had become, shadow operators investigating systemic corruption, vigilantes seeking justice outside conventional channels, their foundation remained commitment to fellow operators above political expediency or personal safety. Dual approach, Thomas decided, leadership role reasserting itself naturally despite years of separation. Rivera manages evidence transmission to media contact, ensuring secure delivery and source protection. Emma establishes ghost communication with Team Alpha, providing direct warning about compromised operation. I maintain perimeter security and extraction preparation. The operational structure reflected their natural specializations, Rivera's communication expertise, Emma's tactical innovation, Thomas's leadership and security focus. Despite years apart, Ghost Team resumed operational efficiency with the synchronization that had once made them legendary among special operators. Emma prepared specialized communication equipment, calibrating frequencies to penetrate standard military monitoring while reaching Team Alpha's secure channels. The technical challenge required precise configuration, matching operational parameters of current military deployment protocols, information Rivera provided from his continued connection to active duty networks. Team Alpha's communication officer is Lieutenant Sarah Reynolds, Rivera informed Emma as she completed configuration. First deployment with current team, but extensive experience in previous operations, most likely to recognize and respond to non-standard communication attempt. Emma nodded understanding as she finalized transmission protocols. Message content? Minimal operational details, Thomas advised. Sufficient warning to prevent deployment without compromising our position or evidence against Palmer. Emma composed message with the precision that had characterized her operational communications. Direct, unambiguous, providing essential warning without exposing Ghost Team's full operational awareness. The transmission would alert Team Alpha to compromise command without revealing the extent of Phoenix Dawn's penetration or Ghost Team's continued existence. As Emma prepared final transmission, Rivera reported from the communication center. Evidence package transmission initiated. Washington Post contact confirming receipt protocol. Estimated public disclosure timeline 4 hours. Sufficient to prevent classification containment, but requiring protection for Team Alpha if they refuse deployment. The assessment confirmed operational complexity. If Team Alpha refused deployment based on Ghost Team's warning, they would face immediate countermeasures from Palmer's organization. Their safety required either continued operational deception or immediate extraction outside conventional military channels. If they stand down, Palmer will target them immediately, Emma observed. Tactical assessment identifying protection requirements beyond their current resources. We have extraction capabilities established, Thomas assured her. Ghost Network maintains resources specifically for recovering operators from compromised command situations. The reference to Ghost Network suggested operational structure beyond their immediate team, resources and personnel Emma had not been aware of during her self-imposed exile. The implications extended beyond single investigation to systematic response to institutional corruption. Ghost Network? She questioned, seeking operational clarity. Thomas exchanged glances with Rivera before responding. After recovery and classification as KIA, I established connection with other operators who had identified similar patterns of compromised operations and expendable classifications. The network grew organically, veterans from different service branches united by common recognition of systemic corruption within command structures. A shadow veterans organization, Emma translated, understanding the operational approach despite its unconventional nature. Operating outside official channels to protect operators from their own command when necessary. Protecting those who serve from those who sacrifice them for political convenience, Thomas confirmed. Your tactical innovations provided foundation for our operational methodology. Ghost protocols adapted for network-wide implementation. The revelation shifted Emma's understanding of her isolation over the past 5 years. While she had withdrawn from service in individual penance, Thomas and eventually Rivera had constructed systematic response to the corruption that had claimed their team. Her tactical innovations, developed for specialized operations, had evolved into protection mechanisms for operators throughout military and intelligence communities. Transmission window approaching, Rivera announced, interrupting Emma's contemplation of these implications. Andrew's communication protocols transitioning to pre-deployment configuration, optimal transmission opportunity in 3 minutes. Emma completed final adjustments to communication equipment, preparing message for transmission directly to Lieutenant Reynolds' secure channel. The approach represented significant operational risk. Unsanctioned communication with active duty team preparing for deployment could trigger immediate security response and potential compromise of Ghost Team's position. Yet the alternative, allowing fellow operators to deploy into deliberately compromised operation, remained unacceptable violation of the principle that had defined Ghost Team through its operational history and subsequent evolution into Ghost Network. No operator sacrificed for political convenience. No team abandoned to bureaucratic expedience. Transmission initiated, Emma reported as she activated specialized communication protocols designed to penetrate standard military security without triggering conventional monitoring systems. Message delivery estimated 60 seconds. The three veterans maintained focused silence as communication systems executed their designed function, reaching beyond official channels to establish operator-to-operator connection that transcended compromised command structures. The moment represented culmination of years of separate journeys: Emma's isolated penance, Rivera's covert investigation, Thomas's construction of protective network, united in common purpose despite different paths. Confirmation received, Emma announced as communication system registered acknowledgement from Team Alpha's secure channel. Lieutenant Reynolds has received warning and authentication protocols. The initial objective achieved, Ghost Team's focus shifted to potential countermeasures from Palmer's organization. If Team Alpha refused deployment based on unsanctioned warning, Phoenix Dawn would implement immediate containment protocols, targeting both the operators who refused deployment and potential sources of their information. Evidence transmission complete, Rivera reported simultaneously. Washington Post contact confirms secure receipt and verification protocols initiated. Publication timeline accelerated based on Team Alpha's situation. Estimated public disclosure within 2 hours. The accelerated timeline improved protection for Team Alpha by reducing Palmer's window for containment operations, but created immediate vulnerability until public disclosure established sufficient visibility to prevent covert action against operators who refused deployment. Team Alpha responding, Emma reported as communication system registered return transmission. They've initiated stand-down protocols under equipment malfunction classification, buying time without triggering immediate security response. The approach reflected professional understanding from Team Alpha's leadership, creating plausible explanation for delayed deployment rather than direct refusal that would trigger countermeasures. The tactical decision provided operational space for Ghost Team's evidence to reach public channels before Palmer could implement containment. Ghost Network assets positioning for extraction support if required, Thomas added, monitoring separate communication channel connected to their wider support structure. Team Alpha's security remains priority until evidence publication establishes sufficient protection through visibility. Emma recognized the operational elegance of their approach, utilizing public disclosure as protection mechanism rather than conventional security protocols. Once evidence connecting Palmer to compromised operations became public knowledge, his ability to target operators through official channels would diminish significantly as oversight mechanisms activated beyond his classification authority. Palmer will recognize the pattern once Team Alpha stands down, Rivera observed, tactical assessment identifying immediate countermeasures. He'll implement containment protocols targeting potential information sources, including Harrison, Hayes, and Wilson, Emma concluded, concerns shifting to their unofficial command structure now vulnerable to Palmer's response. Their official positions provide partial protection, but Phoenix Dawn has demonstrated willingness to eliminate witnesses regardless of status. Thomas nodded grimly. Ghost Network has established surveillance on all three. Extraction protocols prepared if Palmer initiates direct action. The complexity of their operation continued expanding. Evidence transmission, Team Alpha protection, command structure security, and preparation for Palmer's inevitable countermeasures. Yet the foundation remains simple. Operators protecting operators when official channels became compromised by political corruption. Team Alpha has successfully delayed deployment, Emma reported as communication system registered updated status. Maintenance issues requiring minimum 6-hour resolution timeline. Sufficient window for evidence publication and public visibility. The achievement represented significant victory, 4 operators saved from deliberate sacrifice through direct intervention outside official channels. Yet Emma recognized the operational reality beyond immediate success. For every Team Alpha they managed to warn, countless others had deployed into compromised operations without Ghost Network's protection. How many teams? She asked quietly, question directed at Thomas and Rivera but encompassing larger operational reality. How many operators have been sacrificed while I repaired weapons and ran memorial miles? Thomas met her gaze directly, understanding the weight behind her question. Too many, he acknowledged, but fewer each month as Ghost Network expands its protective capabilities. Your tactical innovations adapted for wider implementation have saved dozens of operators from compromised deployments. The assessment provided cold comfort against 5 years of isolated penance, while others had constructed active response to the corruption she had fled. Yet Emma recognized the operational truth behind Thomas's statement. Her withdrawal had provided survival necessary for eventual justice, her tactical innovations continuing to protect operators even during her absence from active service. Washington Post initiating publication protocols, Rivera announced, monitoring secure communication with their media contact. Initial release scheduled within 60 minutes. Full disclosure package following at 30-minute intervals to prevent classification containment. The announcement shifted operational focus from immediate tactical concerns to strategic implications. Once evidence against Palmer and Phoenix Dawn reached public channels beyond classification authority, the systematic corruption they had investigated would face scrutiny impossible to contain through conventional means. Palmer will recognize publication imminent based on Team Alpha's stand-down, Thomas assessed, tactical focus shifting to immediate countermeasures. His options narrow to immediate extraction or evidence destruction before public disclosure establishes containment impossibility. Emma considered tactical scenarios with operational precision. His most logical approach targets the source, us, before evidence publication completes. Direct action against known investigation participants with sufficient resources to eliminate witnesses and potential evidence repositories. The assessment suggested immediate threat to their current position. Palmer utilizing intelligence community resources to identify and neutralize Ghost Team before evidence publication established protection through visibility. Their temporary operational center, while established outside conventional surveillance networks, remained vulnerable to concentrated counterintelligence response with sufficient resources. Relocation protocols initiated, Thomas confirmed, having reached similar tactical conclusion. Ghost Network has prepared multiple fallback positions with enhanced security parameters. Our current location has served its purpose, but presents unacceptable vulnerability given operational progression. The decision reflected sound tactical judgment, maintaining mobility rather than defending fixed position against superior resources. Emma recognized the operational approach as consistent with Ghost Team's historical methodology, adapted for their current civilian environment rather than combat theater. Extraction vehicles positioned, Rivera reported, securing communication equipment for immediate transport. Ghost Network confirms surveillance on Palmer indicates resource mobilization consistent with counterintelligence response. Estimated response window 45 minutes to current location. The timeline provided sufficient operational space for controlled withdrawal rather than emergency extraction, allowing secure transport of evidence backups and communication equipment essential for monitoring publication progress in Team Alpha's continued security. As Ghost Team prepared for tactical relocation, Emma found moment for direct question that had remained unaddressed throughout operational focus. "Why didn't you contact me?" she asked Thomas, professional composure momentarily yielding to personal connection. 5 years believing you died on that mountain while you built Ghost Network. Thomas paused in equipment preparation, expression reflecting complex emotions beneath tactical focus. "I tried," he admitted, through channels Rivera established after his own recovery, but you disappeared completely. Professional extraction from the system executed with precision that respected even while frustrating our search efforts. "And when you found me," Emma pressed, seeking understanding rather than accusation. "You were healing," Thomas replied simply, processing grief and guilt through structure you had established. Operational assessment indicated intervention might destabilize rather than support your recovery process. The explanation reflected care beneath tactical calculation. Recognition of psychological impact beyond operational considerations. Emma recognized the leadership quality that had defined Thomas throughout their service together, balancing mission requirements against personnel welfare with genuine concern for those under his command. "So you watched from distance," she concluded, understanding their operational approach despite its personal impact. maintain surveillance without direct contact. Until Palmer's renewed operations targeting Team Alpha created mission parameters requiring Ghost Team reactivation, Thomas confirmed. Your tactical expertise and operational innovation remained essential for protecting operators from Phoenix Dawn's systematic sacrifice. The assessment provided context for their current reunion, not merely personal connection restored, but operational necessity requiring Ghost Team's legendary capabilities. Emma recognized the pattern from their active duty service, personal considerations secondary to mission requirements, yet human connection providing foundation for operational excellence. Ghost Network represents evolution of everything we built as Ghost Team, Rivera added, joining their conversation while continuing equipment preparation. Your tactical innovations protecting operators beyond what we could achieve through conventional channels. The penance you served while rebuilding weapons protected lives through systems you created before withdrawing. The perspective offered alternative interpretation of Emma's 5-year isolation, not merely individual healing but necessary survival, ensuring tactical innovations continued protecting operators through Ghost Network's implementation. Her withdrawal, viewed through this lens, represented tactical retreat preserving capabilities for eventual counteroffensive rather than abandonment of fellow operators. Extraction vehicles approaching, Thomas announced, operational focus returning as relocation timeline advanced. Final equipment preparation and departure protocols initiated. Ghost Team completed extraction preparation with the synchronized efficiency that had defined their operational reputation, each member anticipating others' requirements without explicit coordination. Despite years of separation, their tactical connection remained intact, muscle memory of countless operations creating seamless teamwork transcending individual trauma and separate journeys. As they departed the temporary operational center, Emma recognized the completion of transformation initiated through Rivera's resurrection and Thomas's impossible return. The Ghost had fully emerged from civilian disguise, tactical operator replacing armorer's precision with warrior's purpose. The penance of isolated guilt yielded to active service, protecting those still vulnerable to systemic corruption. Whatever awaited beyond their current operation, public disclosure, forcing accountability, or continued shadow war against entrenched corruption, Ghost Team had reunited with purpose, transcending individual healing. The mission parameters extended beyond Palmer to systematic protection for operators throughout military and intelligence communities. Ghost Network's evolution of Emma's tactical innovations into structural response against institutional betrayal. The sun crested Atlanta's skyline as their vehicles departed, symbolic illumination reflecting operational reality, darkness yielding to light, secrets exposed to public scrutiny, justice emerging from shadow operations necessary when conventional channels failed. Ghost Team traveled toward uncertain future, but with shared purpose rooted in their foundational principle. No operator left behind, no sacrifice accepted for political convenience, no betrayal unanswered when command structures abandoned those they claimed to serve. 6 months after Palmer's public exposure, Emma Lawson stood on Montana hillside watching sunrise illuminate memorial stones bearing 3 names: Thomas Anderson, Michael Rivera, Benjamin Clark. The ceremonial markers contained no bodies, representing instead the operational deaths necessary for Ghost Network's creation, rather than the men who continued serving beyond official existence. The Washington Post expose had created political earthquake beyond Palmer's individual corruption. Congressional investigations, military leadership restructuring, intelligence community oversight reforms. Phoenix Dawn's systematic sacrifice of operators for political and financial gain faced public scrutiny impossible to contain through classification or bureaucratic obstruction. Palmer himself had attempted escape when publication became imminent, his private jet prepared for international departure beyond extradition. Ghost Network assets had ensured his detention through anonymous tip to FBI Counterintelligence Division, providing exact departure details and evidence, ensuring immediate arrest rather than tactical response that might have justified lethal force. Justice through accountability rather than vengeance, the distinction Emma had insisted upon throughout their operation. Palmer now awaited trial on multiple charges including conspiracy, treason, and accessory to murder, his financial empire dismantled through civil forfeiture targeting proceeds of criminal enterprise. Colonel Hayes had received promotion to brigadier general, her new position overseeing accountability reforms within Special Operations Command structures. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson served on her staff, their combined experience providing foundation for systemic protections against recurrence of Phoenix Dawn's operational corruption. Captain Harrison, now Major Harrison following review of his service record, had established specialized training program integrating Ghost Team's tactical innovations into standard special operations methodology. His relationship with Emma evolved from antagonism to respectful partnership, their shared connection to Thomas creating foundation for professional collaboration transcending previous conflict. Thomas and Rivera continued Ghost Network operations from secure locations throughout the country, their official deaths providing operational freedom beyond conventional constraints. Their work expanded beyond reactive protection to proactive reform, identifying vulnerable command structures before corruption could establish operational foothold. Emma's own path had evolved beyond expectation. Following Palmer's exposure, she had received formal invitation to rejoin Naval Special Warfare in advisory capacity, utilizing her tactical innovations and operational experience to reshape training protocols protecting operators from both battlefield threats and command corruption. She had declined official reinstatement, recognizing greater impact possible through Ghost Network's independent operations. Instead, she divided her time between Montana Training Facility and operational deployments with Ghost Team. Her tactical expertise protecting operators through both official reforms and shadow interventions when conventional channels proved insufficient. The memorial stones before her represented not grief but transformation, commemorating not death but evolution from conventional service to protection, transcending official limitations. The 3 miles she still ran each morning no longer represented penance for survival, but preparation for continued service, protecting those who followed in their operational footsteps. As dawn fully illuminated the memorial, 3 birds took flight from surrounding trees, eagle, hawk, and falcon rising together into infinite sky. Their wings caught morning light like souls finally released from earthly constraints, free to soar beyond boundaries that had once defined their existence. Emma watched their ascent with quiet acknowledgement of symbolism beyond coincidence. For those who served in shadows, greatest honor came not through public recognition, but through continued protection of those who stood watch on freedom's frontier. Their sacrifice written not in stone, but in lives continuing because they had chosen to stand between danger and those they were sworn to protect. Ghost Team's legacy lived not in classified records or redacted reports, but in operators returning home because tactical innovations had prepared them for threats both foreign and domestic. In commands restructured to value operator welfare above political convenience. In systems designed to protect those who serve from those who would sacrifice them for expedience or financial gain. Emma turned from the memorial toward waiting vehicle where Thomas and Rivera prepared for their next deployment. Ghost Team, reborn through fire and separated by years, reunited with purpose transcending individual healing or personal vendetta. Their mission continuing, not from obligation but from commitment to fundamental principle that had always defined their operational philosophy. No operator left behind, no sacrifice accepted without purpose, no betrayal unanswered when command structures abandoned those they claimed to serve. The Ghost walked away from memorial stones bearing names of men who lived on through their work, returning to service that transcended official recognition or conventional boundaries. Her steps carried not the weight of guilt, but the purpose of protection. For those who served in shadows so others might stand in light, for those who sacrificed comfort for country, for those who deserved better than betrayal by the very systems they had sworn to uphold. Behind her, morning light illuminated memorial stones as living testimony to transformation rather than termination. Not graves marking ending, but markers indicating beginning of service beyond conventional constraints. The Ghost had emerged from civilian disguise, not to seek vengeance, but to ensure justice, not to destroy systems, but to reform structures corrupted by power and politics. For those who served in shadows, the greatest honor was being forgotten while their work endured forever. Their sacrifice written not in stone, but in the lives that continued because they chose to stand watch in the darkness.